Getting on.
Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the March 8th, 2022 Little Rock City Board of Directors special call meeting. We'd like to welcome those that are in attendance as well as those that are watching at home or streaming online. Madam Clerk, if you would, please call the roll.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Richardson.
Here.
Director Webb.
Here.
Director Peck.
Here.
Director Wright. Director Wyrick.
Present.
Director Compuris. Director Phillips.
Present.
Director Adcock.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hines.
Present.
Mayor Scott.
Present. I'll ask now for the invocation. Director Compuris, if you mind just giving us a brief invocation?
Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for our freedom. Thank you for our ability to discuss things rationally and in peace. Thank you for being able to have a practicing democracy. Please be with the people of Ukraine as they try to preserve their democracy, their ability to make decisions on their own, and to control their own destiny. Amen.
Amen. Can we all please stand for a pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go to our modifications, I want to take this time to recognize City Directors Adcock, Wyrick, Peck, Wright, and Webb. Today is International Women's Day, and we're so grateful for their service and leadership to the city of Little Rock. Let's give them all a round of applause. And we say the same to every woman that's in attendance today and watching online. We recognize each of you as well. Madam Clerk, we have one modification for today's agenda, a resolution offered by Director Compuris to show support to the people of Ukraine. As with the board policy, the resolution can be added to the agenda by a supermajority vote. Would you please read is there a motion to add this resolution?
So moved.
I hear a motion from Vice Mayor Hines. Is there a second from Director Wyrick? Is there a second from Director Wyrick?
Yes. Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. It has now been added to the agenda. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read that resolution, then we'll move forward with the other ordinances.
A resolution to state the support of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas for the people of Ukraine as they heroically resist the blatant and unwarranted attack of their freedom by Russia and for other purposes.
Move for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Mayor, can we add the acknowledgement and recognition of our Madam Clerk for International Women's Day? I don't think we mentioned her name when we acknowledged our female board members. Can we add her as well and give her a round of applause?
We'll give Madam Clerk a round of applause as well.
Thank you.
Good job, Ken.
Madam Clerk, would you please start with the agenda item? I'm usually not at loss for words, but Director Richardson has the ability to do that.
So we're going to start with 1 through 4 for the third time.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize Osborne, Carrera and Associates Incorporated to perform an actuarial evaluation and stress testing at a cost not to exceed $6,750 for the purpose of evaluating the feasibility of various benefit increase amounts for members of the Little Rock Firemen's Relief and Pension Fund, now administered by the Arkansas Local Police and Fire Retirement System, to declare an emergency and for the purposes An ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas ordinance number 22,067 of November 16th, 2021 to include funding for a pilot program for the project for a community schools after-school arts program by the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, A+ Arkansas, and to amend the date of the grant term and for other purposes. An ordinance to call a special election in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas for the purpose of submitting to the electors of the city the question of reducing the existing combined annual library ad valorem property tax for capital improvements from the existing combined rate of 1.8 mills to the new rate of 1.3 mills on the dollar assessed valuation of taxable property in the city of Little Rock to be extended and pledged to an issue or issues of taxable, tax-exempt, or both bonds not to exceed $42 million in aggregate principal amount, to refund one or more outstanding issues of capital improvement bonds, and to finance the acquiring, construction, and equipping of additional capital improvements of public libraries owned and operated by the City of Little Rock and Central Arkansas Library System, and to authorize the issuance of the bonds on such terms and conditions as shall be approved by the City of Little Rock, prescribing other matters relating thereto, to declare an emergency and for other purposes. An ordinance to grant a franchise to Unity Fiber LLC as a telecommunication and fiber optic service provider to permit the use of rights-of-ways and airspace within the corporate limits of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, to reserve for both parties the right to seek modifications of this agreement as may be required by changes in federal or state law, to declare an emergency and for the purposes. Third and final reading.
We've now had 3 readings on all of those agenda items. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. We have emergency clause for items 1, 3, and 4. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. And we took up M1 already. We'll now, a motion to adjourn this special call meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion from Vice Mayor. Is there a second? Second from Director Webb. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it, meeting adjourned. We'll now move into our agenda meeting. Part of our first, welcome everyone to our City Board agenda meeting. Our first presentation today is Mr. Jay Cheshire, CEO of the Little Rock Chamber, who will conduct our chamber update. It's technically for both Q4 2021. Due to the budget season, he was not able to come on our accord. We pushed things back because we wanted to get the budget completed. Now he'll also, I guess, between both Q4 21 and first quarter 2022. Thank you so much, Mr. Cheshire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and obviously all of our City Board of Directors. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about the work that was done in 2021. You're going to see a PowerPoint here on the screen in front of you with some of this information. As the mayor stated, this actually was put together back in November. So you're going to see some numbers that I'm going to give you a few updates on, simply because the presentation that was sent was actually sent prior to the end of the year. So as you know, from the perspective of our work together, our approach to economic development obviously begins with business expansion and retention, simply because if we don't do a good job of taking care of what we already have, we certainly won't be very good or sustainable at attracting new industry. So we'll talk a little bit about that work in a few minutes. Business attraction always gets most of the attention, both from obviously you as a board, as well as the media in the Little Rock and Central Arkansas and state of Arkansas standpoint. We'll talk in a few minutes about what that looked like. Some things that don't necessarily get as much attention: small business growth and entrepreneurship. We're going to report on some of those things. Obviously, regionalism, given the fact that our marketplace, we're trying to attract companies that don't necessarily think a 200,000 population city is big enough for what they're looking for. And so from a regional perspective, we are marketing an area of over 1 million people in the Central Arkansas region, the Metro Little Rock area. So we'll talk more about that. And then lastly, workforce development and education, an increasingly always obviously important piece of what we do, but becoming even more so as we go forward. For those of you that have not had an opportunity to meet every member on our team, we've got a couple of new ones since I was standing before you last year. First of all, you have obviously James Reddish, who is our Executive Vice President. Jeremiah Anderson, for those of you that haven't met Jeremiah, we borrowed him from the Dallas Regional Chamber. We're never giving him back. And so he came and joined us a little over a year ago. Obviously, Christy Barr has been with us for quite some time. Matthew Ballou, doing our existing industry work, is relatively new. And then, of course, Paul Latour, who you all know very, very well. Of our 15, 16, 17 member chamber staff, these are the 6 folks that are dedicated every day to doing this economic development work. So from a 21 perspective, I want to back up just a second and talk about moving into the COVID era and obviously what's happened since then. If you'll recall, going back in 2019, we talked about how our marketing had provided some additional prospect activity that we hadn't seen, that we were seeing growing activity in that regard. And from the pandemic coming to today, that actually has only gotten bigger and better. I've said in many times on a public stage that our current prospect activity is as good as I've seen it in my entire career, not just here in Little Rock, but in my entire career in economic development. And we'll talk a little bit about what that's going to mean for opportunities for us in a few minutes. But these numbers back when they were put together, we're missing the December number. So actually, there were 57 total prospects through the end of 2021, 51 new location prospects, and six expansion prospects. We had 21 prospect visits, as well as 75 existing industry visits. With COVID, obviously, our existing industry visits aren't what we want them to be. You're going to see from our plan in 2022 how we're going to more than double that. But in terms of projects completed, 4 projects completed representing not quite 4,000 jobs, 117 plus million in new annual payroll, and 633 million in new capital investment. What you'll find with these numbers are they're typically conservative because companies want to err on the conservative side when they make these announcements. And so we expect far more than that. In fact, you've seen some information over the last few years where we're now, from a 3-year standpoint, at almost 8,000 new jobs. To put that in perspective, our goal for this previous capital campaign that's ending this year was 1,000 new jobs per year. So effectively, we did in 1 year what our plan to our private economic development supporters actually, we did more this year than we had planned in doing for the entire 3 years. So unprecedented is a word that's been used in the past, and I will echo that. We started traveling again back in the late summer. We had 2 marketing trips that you can see the information on there. When we're traveling, a lot of times, whether it's to a convention or a possibility to meet with site selection firms, we do that not only at the event, but we'll meet with others that are in that area. We'll meet with companies who have a presence in the Metro Little Rock area while they're thanking them for their business. And then obviously the Site Selectors Guild is something that we always do because those are the folks that are the ones responsible for the Trex kind of projects that obviously we landed last year. Those are the kinds of projects those folks work, and we want to meet with them, as they say in Louisiana, early and often. So we do that. We do that throughout the year. And in small business growth and entrepreneurship, we hosted the Chamber Small Business Impact Awards. We also helped with the ICBA Think Tech Accelerator Demo Day with our friends at the Venture Center, who we helped create. We hosted our Equip series, building a corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion movement. We're working with your city staff on doing some more work in that effort. Webinars, all these things, and the Spark program, which is a pre-accelerator program for small businesses, which hosted its 3rd cohort. In the midst of COVID, having the opportunity to do some of this from a hybrid standpoint, both from an in-person, spaced correctly perspective as well as a digital standpoint, allowed us to not stop our opportunities to present information for small business growth and entrepreneurship opportunities, but actually enhance that. When you look at our Metro Little Rock Alliance work, where we're representing our entire region, when we're out trying to recruit companies to look at sites and buildings and opportunities in the area, we focused our lead generation, obviously, on business attraction from this perspective. It is a marketing alliance made up of folks across this metro region. The board is made up of economic development professionals as a committed structure for decision-making in that. In our 2021 achievements, one of the things that we did this year that I won't go into a lot of detail on, but we have been tracking through, if you'll recall in the Love Little Rock campaign, we were tracking through an opportunity to see who was coming to that new website during that campaign, not who the person was, but who the company was. And then we were able to respond to that from the perspective of sending at that digital address some information. We're doing the same thing now with site consultants. We're doing the same thing now at major conventions. For example, we'll be doing this type of program at the Farnborough Air Show, looking and talking with aerospace executives that are going to be at that show, letting them know that we're there, giving them the opportunity real time to schedule meetings with us or have us present them information. We're doing this with site location consultants on a quarterly basis. If you do it more often than that, then you become junk mail, so to speak. And so if we're trying to get into those social media feeds of those specific people, we're trying to keep Little Rock and Metro Little Rock top of mind in a marketing perspective. This kind of gives you a little bit of information about what that looks like when we do that type of marketing. Obviously, that's just a piece of what we do, but we found it very effective in trying to generate not only awareness of the region, but also the ability to attract new prospects to the area. So just a little bit of information in that regard. We had a significant site consultant outreach project in October and November. This talks about some of those things that we did, including sending Jeremiah to visit with the Site Selectors Guild. James and I both are traveling as well now, not only visiting with site selection companies and the people that are doing that work, but also with some of our prospects as well. So as you can see, our plan for 22 includes a significantly more direct site selector visits and city visits and a return to industry prospecting conferences now that hopefully we're getting out of this pandemic. Another part of our work in the economic development area is obviously workforce development and education. As you heard, whether it was the Trex project, whether it's Amazon, it doesn't matter which one that we look at. In the very first meeting that we have with these site location consultants and businesses, this is the first topic they want to talk about. Not only do we have the type of skilled talent that they're looking for, but where is it and how are you creating more of it? We actually, through workforce analytics, take that down to both the zip code and census block levels so that we can show them where those people are throughout this region and how they can attract them, but also leading with the fact that this is what we're doing with all 4 school districts in Pulaski County and trying to develop the talent for the future. That talent ranging from everybody from a floor level assembler to a chief executive, an architect, an engineer, an IT person. So it includes both the blue collar skilled levels as well as obviously college and professional skills. So the best part about this was the first countywide freshman class for academies of Central Arkansas through the Ford Next Generation Learning Framework began last fall. We're excited about that. On October 7th, all 4 school districts were designated officially as Ford Next Generation Learning Communities. That's going to pay dividends for us going forward, not only from the standpoint of attracting schools school-age students to attend school in public schools in Little Rock and Pulaski County, but also be able to show with specificity what that looks like in terms of talent coming out of those schools, whether they're going to college for further education or available to go into the workforce with industry-recognized credentials and certification as they graduate from high school. It will lift the boat from the perspective of that tide of the economy for everyone. So looking at 2022, which obviously we're entering into the third month already, some of our goals: 150 annual business retention and expansion visits, 100 small business visits. Again, 1,000 new jobs is our stated goal for 2022. We hope that we greatly exceed it, as we have done in the last few years. We will take 6 marketing and existing company headquarter type trips for the year. Actually, we've got one planned for April, and so you're going to see some reporting on that in the quarterly reports that you should be receiving now at your home. If you're not, please let us know. Some of the key initiatives: we are looking at our digital marketing to go to the next level from an implementation standpoint. We have found what I talked about a few minutes ago to be very effective because we're hitting these folks in areas that they're interested in, and then having the opportunity to create conversations about what we have available, what's happening here, the good news that's coming from Little Rock, and why they ought to consider this city, this region for potential projects. We'll be, in fact, right now we're in year 2 implementation of the Academies of Central Arkansas. You have representatives from our economic development team, along with representatives from all 4 school districts in Pulaski County in Nashville, Tennessee, as we speak, going through a 2-day process about Ford Next Generation Learning, seeing how the Nashville public schools are doing it, giving us a better opportunity to implement it in our high schools, all 10 high schools here in Pulaski County. We obviously are now going to be increasing our small business and business retention and expansion outreach capacity now that we're going back in person. One of the things that we have got to continue to focus on, and we really appreciate your efforts in helping do this, is continue real estate product development. The reality of this is, if we don't have it, if we don't have a site that's ready within 90 days from a shovel-ready standpoint to start construction, then we're not in the economic development work. We're not going to be competitive with those around the city, or excuse me, around the country that do have that. This is something that we're constantly working on. Brian Day and the Port Authority Board, along with yourselves, have been absolutely significant in helping us create what we have and then create more. You recently added to that as we were trying to finish the Trex project. We'll at the same time create some property for another project that's working right now, and then secondly, also to expand the opportunity for us to do our super site development, which I'm going to end this piece with. You know, one of the things that always gets the attention of folks across the country and across the world is when a Ford Motor Company, for example, announces a major project that's a super project outside of Memphis at the Memphis Super Site, where you're talking about thousands of new jobs, not only at that specific site, but then the ancillary support companies that follow those types of projects in the area. Little Rock and Metro Little Rock has been in the process, with your significant assistance, of trying to create such a super site. It's at the port. It's just south of the port. We hope to have a little over 1,000 acres when it's all said and done, and we're awfully close to that now, so that we can take that VOR cone that's been an impediment to the growth of the port, move it to its new site that the FAA has approved in North Little Rock. Actually, that should take place. The construction of the road is now complete into the new site. The construction of the facility itself should take place this summer, and then the FAA will start their process of turning it on and making sure that all of that works. All of that in hopes that 18 months or so from now, we will have the ability to turn that existing one off, which impedes our ability to build anything in that specific area, which then opens up this super site and gives us the opportunity to attract, hopefully over the next few years, an employer unlike we've ever had the opportunity to attract before. 1,000 acres is a big place. Shovel ready is significant when it comes to being competitive in that marketplace. So what that means is all of the roads, all of the rail, all of the water, sewer, electricity, gas, whatever the scenario might be, has to be there, ready to turn on, or be very quickly ready to turn on and have that construction finished in a short period of time. So you're going to be seeing and hearing from us as we go through this process. Again, Brian Day and the Port Board is doing a phenomenal job in helping push this effort forward. It's something that may not come to fruition in the next year or two from the perspective of locating that huge industry, but it's also, once it happens, going to be something that will be an economy changer for us. So with that, we could talk about all of the scope of services that obviously is part of the contract for services that we have with you. That just kind of hits the highlights for 2021, and I'll just end with this. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, the tech park is full. The tech park has been full for 2 years. The tech park is full. New companies growing, new companies coming to the area because of the tech park. So if you look at entrepreneurship and you look at the fintech accelerators and you look at the small business work and small business development that's taking place there, it's a robust economic generator for this city and for this region. When you look at the port and you see the now close to 8,000 jobs that are happening out there with the addition of Trex, it becomes a city unto itself. When you look at its reach, we all want, obviously, everyone in Little Rock that works in Little Rock to live in Little Rock, and we're doing everything with the academies of Central Arkansas and everything else to encourage that. But the reality is there were people from 23 different counties this morning that woke up and drove to Pulaski County and went to work at the port. So we are a region that obviously is accessible from a transportation perspective. These folks choose to live in other areas and drive here to work. We're trying to do our darndest to give them a reason to to live here, to learn here, to play here, all of those things. But the reality of that is it takes all of us to do economic development. And obviously you guys are just absolutely at the tip of that spear when it comes to doing this work. We couldn't do it without you. We appreciate representing you. We appreciate your interest in your work. We appreciate the mayor being on call 24 hours, 7 days a week, as he has been over the last 3 years as we've gone through the wonderful success that we've had the opportunity to reflect upon today. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Chester, we just want to extend our appreciation to you and your team. It truly has been a strategic partnership. As you shared, over the past 3 years, we've seen not only unprecedented growth, but historic jobs growth of close to 8,000 new jobs. And it happens because of strong business development efforts. It happens because we do have land and product from the port standpoint. This board recently, just to remind the board what's significant that you did recently, to continue to forward this is close to $10 million that we committed to the Port Authority to create more access for Trex and other facilities within that to create our super site. And so those are the things that as we continue to recruit other companies to come to our city, that really matters, the way we're able to put towards that. But we have to continue to build and build for our future, build for our growth. But we are able to do that. It's truly been a pleasure working alongside Jay and his entire team as we've had some late nights, some early mornings to get the job done, but also a shout out to our city departments that, whether it's the fire department figuring out an issue for Amazon, whether it's planning department, public works, working hand in hand to get many things done, not only to help the companies that are here, but also to really create a one-stop shop. And that goes a long ways in our recruitment efforts. I can still think of a number of times that Trex said they couldn't believe that they were able to get this kind of concierge service here in our city. And so that's truly a commitment that we give to our city departments and what they're doing on the ready to ensure we bring this close to 8,000 jobs over the course of 3 years. That's been unprecedented and historic. So just again, Jay, we just want to say thank you We also want to thank the members of the city board because it doesn't happen without your votes. It doesn't happen without your ability to help move things forward as we all are representing this entire city, but also this region as well.
Mayor, and you actually stole my ending thunder because I was going to brag on Jamie, I was going to brag on Greg, I was going to brag on Tom, I was going to brag on Bruce, because the reality is we see the top of the surface activity, but those folks are engaged in the weeds when we are having issues, when we're having problems. The fire chief, everyone on this city has
Add Bohannon as well.
right on this city staff has bent over backwards to be a part of this growth, and it's because of their work that we've had this type of growth. Because you're right, when site selectors or companies themselves talk about how easy it is to do business in Little Rock, Arkansas, that only helps us create even more opportunity. So my hat's off to Bruce and your team here at the city.
Thank you so much. Director Richardson, then Director Hines, then Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jay, thank you for your presentation and the work that you do and you guys have been doing. A couple of quick questions. Have you guys considered or even thought about partnering with our Office of Reentry in terms of, remember you mentioned workforce development and education, and unfortunately, there's some parts of our population, due to unemployment or underemployment, are facing some social ills that are responsible for a lot of the violence that we see. So have you even had conversations or thoughts about partnering with our Office of Reentry to do training and education and employment of that particular population?
So it's a great question, and appreciate the opportunity to address just a little bit of it. The answer is the Office of Reentry, whether it's from the city's perspective or from the state's perspective or through a Goodwill or someone like that, we're doing anything and everything we can to, first of all, make people aware of opportunity. Because the reality is, we live it every day, and so we think everybody knows it. But in reality, if they're not part of it, or if no one is specifically reaching out to them, they don't know those opportunities exist. So using workforce opportunities through the Workforce Investment Board and through reentry, through Goodwill, through those kinds of folks to give people either a second or sometimes even a third chance at life and at having a better life is part of our workforce development efforts, because the reality is those folks need an opportunity. Most of them want that opportunity and will take advantage of it if you just give it to them. So the answer is yes. Now, some of that activity, honestly, Director Richardson, has been muffled at best over the last couple of years because of COVID and the implications of getting people together. But that's part of our workforce development plan moving forward as we come out of that. And had been some of the work we were doing prior to COVID beginning.
Got you. And the second part of it, have you considered, or are you guys collaborating with our workforce center to do the same kind of things we were just talking about for the disconnected adults and youth population that, once again, I think that showed up on the radar screen in terms of responsible for a lot of the criminal activities that we're seeing in our community because it's either unemployment or underemployment. So have you had any kind of collaboration with the Workforce Center to engage that same kind of approach?
So Christy Barr on our team has been part of that process, yes. And as an example of that, I look at Director Wright next to you. And for example, we did a program at West Central where, because of COVID, we had to do a drive-through scenario. Gotcha. We were the Sonic of jobs, where we had Amazon folks there talking to people literally in their cars, and folks were lined up for blocks and for hours came through that process. So we're doing everything we can to not only reach everyone possible, but to give them an opportunity at a job that, again, we just think they know about, when in reality, most of them don't.
Well, I appreciate you making reference to the people from different counties that are coming in to Pulaski County to work. But like to see us have a direct focus on those who already live here rather than trying to attract others who come live and learn and play and work here. But there's a population here that's employable if we reach out to them with those kinds of efforts you just mentioned.
And Director Richardson, you literally are singing our song when it comes to Forward Next Generation Learning and the implementation of that in the 10 high schools across Pulaski County. Because the reality of that is, if you look at what has happened in Nashville, Tennessee, they went from a graduation rate of less than 58% to a graduation rate in the high 80s now, with core academic achievement of everyone throughout the public school system. They grew the public school system from 55,000 students over in a 13-year time frame to over 80,000 students. Academic achievement went up in every socioeconomic category, and all of those kids, young people, graduated ready to go to work or to go to life or to go to college or both, because the reality is they learned something and then were introduced to companies through that process that gave them the way out of what they didn't think was possible simply by being implemented within the public school system. We see that. Every presentation that we made to the school districts across the county, we had parents walking out behind us asking us when that could be implemented in their child's school. Because that gives, if a kid is interested in learning because they're learning through the framework of something they're interested in, whether it's technology, whether it's medicine, whether it's advanced manufacturing, whether it's welding, whatever it might be, then they learn more, they retain that more, their academic achievement goes up, and they have opportunities coming out of high school, as opposed to thinking they have to go do something else before they're ready for that, and earn a really nice wage coming out of high school doing that as well, much less being better prepared to go to college.
Well, thank you for the presentation, and please let us know how we can help reach that disconnected population that we're talking about, because I think it's critically important that we reach out to them and engage them. Unlike the 90s, the colors are not blue and red, the color is green. That's responsible for a lot of the violence in our community. So any way we can help recruit, connect, collaborate with that particular population, please let us know. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. We'll now go to Vice Mayor Hines, and then Director Phillips, then Director Wyrick, and then Director Wright.
Thank you, Jay, for coming and talking to us today. So from a capital investment standpoint, we talked about what we're doing at the port, and I know we've got a lot more we need to do out there from a needs standpoint. Tell us about the tech park, and I think what gets lost is what you talk about is the entrepreneurial aspect of that with the venture center and the fintech and that type of stuff. So what kind of capital improvements are we needing? I know you and I have had discussions about if the city can come up with some capital that the tech park and the venture center can definitely equally match that, if not make that a force multiplier for you guys to grow the tech park downtown.
So thank you, sir. And from the perspective of the tech park itself, there was an original plan of expansion, and as you'll recall, the second phase expansion had been intended to be a new building next to the existing two buildings that are there. The state of Arkansas has offices, their education department offices in that far southern building, and they will be vacating that space somewhere, we think, in July. And so instead of building a new facility and then turning around and having to retrofit an existing building, the Tech Park Board made the decision that we were first going to focus on that building that's adjacent to us as the second phase. That's going to be approximately $12 million when it's all said and done, from the opportunity of going in there, taking out walls, reimagining that space so that it's entrepreneurial, and it's a place where people want to come to. And so we're already, now that I'm no longer a member of the official member of the Tech Park Board, obviously still working very hard with them, we're already looking at the ways that we can raise that funding to be able to do that work. We have a waiting list of people wanting in the tech park. I can tell you that I'll be meeting with a company in the UK while we're there for Farnborough that wants space in the tech park. We have companies that have come out of the tech park because they've outgrown it that want to grow back into it with much larger space. And so while you look at a company like Aptigee, you look at Justin George and the amazing success story that his company has been, one of the first companies to grow in and grow out of the tech park now has over 150 employees and growing by the week. And so if we have the ability to go to that second phase and do that work in that second building and then fill it hopefully pretty quickly with folks at that next stage that's not quite ready for the official commercial marketplace, then we're going to be able to continue to fill up existing space in downtown Little Rock that's available that is commercial space. The second piece of that is we're going to have to look extremely hard at wet lab type space. That's something that we're missing. That's something that from the bio side of the technology world needs. And so we're looking at how that could be incorporated in the restructuring of that existing building. We don't necessarily think that's going to work. That may have to wait for the third phase, which would be a new building. But if we have that kind of space, as we've seen even through COVID, the tech park remained effectively full throughout the last 2 years. And now we have more people than we have space wanting to be in there again as we're coming out of that. So we're looking at different ways to be able to raise that funding, to be able to do that work. We have a little bit of time, not a whole lot of time to come up with that. But when you look at the FIS FinTech Accelerator, the ICBA Think Tech Accelerator, the companies that we've been able to locate in Little Rock because of those two entities, it's something that, when we first started, we talked about being the birthplace of FinTech because of Systematics in 1968. We are the rebirth place of the new FinTech now with what's happening with folks like Bond.ai, Hexonica, and other companies that are now located here simply because they came here for FinTech accelerators, loved it so much, they decided to move.
Thank you.
Director Phillips, and then after Director Phillips, Director Wyrick, then Wright, then Director Compurish and Miller.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Jay, thank you for the presentation. I want to give you a public shout out for other things that you and your team have been willing to do, specifically as it relates to brainstorming and looking for different opportunities for our residents out in Southwest Little Rock and meeting their needs and being responsive to those folks. So I just want to publicly thank you. Everyone may not know that, but I've bothered you a lot, and we've had numerous meetings trying to give those people what they want in their part of town. So thank you for that publicly. Do have a couple questions for you. Though one, I think I heard, I don't know if it was you or the mayor said that we want to make it easy to do business in Little Rock as it relates to the Port Authority. And I support that, but I want it to be easy to do business, whether you're a big company coming to the port or you're starting a tea shop. And in that regard, Jay, the board a few months ago approved a small business advisory council to focus on some of the small business issues faced by true small businesses, those less than 50 people. And what I would like to ask you to see if there's someone on your team who would attend one of our monthly meetings to not only talk about some of the things you do with Spark and things like that, but also hear back from some of the folks who've been selected to our Small Business Advisory Council on what their perceptions of the chamber are that may be incorrect, maybe opportunity to change them, or hear some ideas from those folks about things that they would like to do. I want to make that request to you publicly and let you know what we're doing and let you know that we could use your help in that area as well.
Director Phillips, thank you, first of all, for the kind recognition. Yes, as we together work to try to make Southwest Little Rock business opportunities more plentiful and bring in hopefully a mix of businesses that the residents of that area want to see. We're happy to be a partner with you in that effort. And when it comes to small business, I think that's something that perception isn't always what people think it is. 80+% of the members of the Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce have less than 50 people. We are truly an organization of small businesses. And so, yes, we want to be at the table with you. We hear and try to respond to things sometimes in a bubble. And being a part of your group and the city's group going forward, first of all, will help us. And most importantly, it will help a whole lot of small businesses. So absolutely, we'd love to be a part of that.
Okay, that's awesome to hear. Two other things, Jay, and I'll get out the way. Secondly, I know there was a conversation about the tech park. I know a lot of businesses have realized the benefits of remote work. Even our, law firms or lawyers are still working from home just because we learn how to be productive, not in the building. Are you seeing that also in the tech park? Is that an issue that we're facing from your perspective?
That's a really good question. If you'd asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said that the likelihood of that happening was pretty high. But instead, what we found and have found is, given the fact that it's full, when folks are trying to be creative, they're wanting to be around other creative folks. When they're trying to learn things and figure things out, they realize they can't do it alone. And so those creative collisions, as we call them, when those people are together, not necessarily in the same room, but in the same building, and they can walk down to the next cubicle or the next little office or whatever it might be to talk about the problems that they're having and collectively try to find ways to solve those. That's what we continue to see, which is why the tech park is full. Those folks want to be around other folks like them in an arena, in a building, in a space where they're having access to resources that they couldn't from the coffee shop or from the apartment or from the home or what have you, as easily as it's available there at the tech park. So as opposed to what most people would have thought would be an absolute destruction of tech park attendance and tech park tenants themselves, it's been the exact opposite. They've learned that they need each other even more so, which is why the place is full.
Okay. That is surprising to me. I wouldn't have guessed that, but that's why you ask the questions and you don't make assumptions, right, Jay?
Good question.
So I appreciate that. Lastly, you mentioned that 80% of the businesses at the chamber are small businesses with less than 50 employees. One thing that's been dear to my heart is what we're doing to attract, grow, or retain, minority-owned businesses. Today is International Women's Day. So not only from a, gender-owned perspective, but a racially-owned perspective, are we keeping track of that? I know we have Med Week and we do things like that to encourage, but talk, if you can, how are we tracking that? Are those numbers growing? And what are we doing to try to help them grow?
So from the standpoint of our Small Business Impact Awards, Spark, as you've already mentioned, and some of the other small business activity, that's one of the reasons why the Chamber Board of Directors welcomed Mary Parham as a brand new board member for this year, because looking and working with her in especially the minority business community and seeing how she's giving back. She actually was at our Small Business Impact Pitch Award event, and as we're sitting there listening to the finalists for that particular award, she leaned over to me and she said, "Whoever wins, I want to give an extra $1,000 to." And I looked at her and I said, "Really?" And she said, "That's exactly what I want to do. I want to pay it forward so that other people like me have the opportunity to do something well." So we're trying to use people that have done it to be a part of the programming that we're doing to help people who are trying to do it. And it's not just a Spark cohort of 10 or 20 companies. We're trying to do that at the level where we can provide resources to 30, 40, 50, 60 companies. One of the things that we do, and we're actually re-implementing, Director Phillips, that you're probably familiar with, is our SCORE business hours at the Chamber. And we want to do that in different city facilities across the city itself, because not everybody wants to come to downtown Little Rock to meet with someone. So whether it's the southwest part, whether it's the west central part, regardless of where that is, we're wanting to put regular business opportunity for mentorship and make it available in those places on a monthly basis. So again, that's part of this work as we're able to get back together face to face and try to help people. You know, folks are, God bless Zoom, but folks are tired of that type of meeting, and it's helped us get through what we've gotten through. But going forward, it's, you know, we're looking forward to the face-to-face help, mentorship, which will do what you're exactly talking about in terms of helping businesses grow.
Okay, and this is my lawyer talking. I say last question, but lawyers always have a last question after the last question. But are we tracking the minority and women-owned businesses as part of who we're helping grow or establish in the city? Are we tracking that, or if not, can we start doing that?
Actually, that's part of the community work that we're working with Dr. Jackson on, in putting that group together, recognizing that you can't account for something you can't measure. You can't determine whether it's growing or not. And Director Phillips, we don't know of anyone that's done that very well. And so we've talked about that in our early stage meetings in creating the community work group, about starting right there. Let's do a mapping of what is, and then once we find out what is, then begin tracking what can be and what happens when we find out who these people are and offer help, how that helps them grow. So that process, and again, hats off to Dr. Deion Jackson and the work that she's doing in that regard. We're together trying to create what it is that you're looking for, because right now no one's doing it.
Okay, that's good to know that it's being worked on. Thank you, Jay.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have for now, Mayor.
Can I cross-examine?
No, you do not get to ask the lawyer question. not how that works.
Thank you so much, Director Phillips, and for members of the board. A lot of the work that Mr. Cheshire is referring to as it relates to Dr. Deion Jackson is the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and what they're doing with Opportunity Little Rock, which is a partnership with both the Little Rock Regional Chamber as well as UA Little Rock, and then other participating businesses, on how we figure out where companies are in the DE&I journey. Each one are at a different journey, but a part of that analysis that both Director Phillips and Mr. Cheshire acknowledged is what's going on right now. So thank you so much, Mr. Cheshire, for making that known. Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. Jay, thank you for coming tonight. And I promise you, if you came to me with the excitement and enthusiasm that you have in regards to Little Rock and what's going on there, I would buy. I really would, because you've been an advocate for us for a number of years and been very, very good at that. I looked at your brochure that came out. I'm not sure if it was January, the end of last year, and it talked about a lot of manufacturing businesses that were looking at different pieces of property, 10 to 20 acres. Some wanted buildings, some didn't want buildings. And I was intrigued with the number of manufacturing companies that are interested in Little Rock. And as I drove through some areas in the last couple of weeks, and Director Phillips has stolen some of my thunder, in Southwest Little Rock, when you go down Baseline Road, West Baseline Road, Mableville Pike, Shackleford Road, I-430 and I-30, there's a lot of land that's there. And when you talk about shovel-ready, needs to be shovel-ready within 90 days. How does that property match up with the 90-day, and what do you think about that property that could be developed into something? I've just seen signs go up everywhere all of a sudden. So I was just curious to know how the shovel-ready would work with some of that property. Do we think it's marketable in a 90-day situation? What are your thoughts about that?
So that's exactly why we work with the Commercial Real Estate Council folks here in Metro Little Rock. One of the things that we're able to do through the Metro Little Rock Alliance marketing website, which again is our marketing outreach to the world, is to show available sites and buildings at that level and have it refreshed on a weekly basis so that we can capture as many of those as possible. Most of the projects that we're working are going to be looking for something bigger than that. But part of our small business outreach includes showing that information to people as well. You know, it's interesting, and I actually had this conversation with Director Compuris not long ago. 17 years ago, I came here and there was all kinds of manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, or what have you, space available. There was a glut, much like we see a glut in office space availability today. Fast forward, and because of the success that we together have been able to have, we now have companies, development companies coming into Little Rock and development companies already in Little Rock building speculative space themselves. The Colliers folks have just recently finished a 200,000 square foot space, and I think it's completely rented now. And so I think what you're going to see over the next few years is a lot of infill activity in those places with those size 50,000 feet or less type facilities, and I think you'll see them fill up pretty quickly, because not only will we continue to help market it, but at the same time, people have to start somewhere and grow from something. And that type of space and its availability today is just not near, in fact, it's nowhere close to where it was 17 years ago when I got here, which is why you'll see more of that begin to come out of the ground, because first of all, companies need it. Secondly, they don't need to start with 50,000, they need to start with 15,000 and then grow from there.
But you do believe that that property is marketable to fit within the 90-day segment that you were addressing?
In most instances, if the appropriate infrastructure is there, whether it's water, sewer, gas, electric, whatever the needs may be. But in most instances, the vast majority of instances, especially with companies of that size, yes, it's ready to go.
Again, your comment about the people in 23 different counties coming into Little Rock, I wish we could figure out how they'd want to live here as opposed to drive in from another county to Little Rock. That was pretty fascinating. That and then the 90-day shovel-ready. So that's interesting information, and I appreciate you bringing that to us.
I'm going to put that in perspective for you. You're familiar with agriculture.
Yes.
And so a pasture along a road looks really pretty. Yep. But if the necessary infrastructure that a company needs to do whatever it is they're going to do, if it's not there, then it's still just a pasture, it's not a site, which is why when we talk about shovel-ready, rail, road, water, sewer, gas, whatever it might be, literally has to be at the boundaries of that property, or it's a nice piece of property, but it's not a site that most of these projects are going to be able to see as actionable unless they literally within 90 days, if they're ready to break ground, could break ground and start construction. Smaller opportunities, absolutely, but those larger ones, that's why it's so expensive to be in this world. It's so expensive to attract those kinds of jobs. But as we've seen through the results, as we've seen through city sales tax collections, property tax collections, and all of those other monikers of success, it works, but you just have to continue investing or it stops.
Thank you very much.
Director Campuris, then Director Miller, then Director Peck.
What happened to Wright?
I'm sorry, actually, Director Wright, you are next. You're before Director.
You missed my name.
I'm just going down these, trying to keep up with all these hands up. I
Never
apologize.
mind.
I can't ever miss your name.
Just messing with
Director
you.
Wright.
You know I'm not gonna let you overlook me.
Not at all.
Anyway, thank you, Jay. We've become very good friends over the years, so trying to figure out what to do. And I really appreciate the fact that you listened to me when I asked you to bring Amazon down to the neighborhood level. And I really appreciate that. And they signed up and hired over 200, I believe it was 210 people that day, right on the spot. So it was very beneficial. And then we were even a site.
That's called economic development.
Yeah, oh yeah. And we had it very well laid out, no backed up traffic on the street, all on the grounds. But we were also a site for a major company that provides other companies to them. So they came and
Right.
recruited at West Central. So the chamber has worked and shared of my concern for the local community, and they have done what I've asked them to do whenever I've asked them to do it. And I appreciate the fact that they care enough to do that, because everything can't be downtown, because everybody can't get down there. But I do have a major site, and I was looking at my phone, and the lady did let me know that she wants me to work closely with her to ensure that whoever ends up with this 40-acre site is someone who is concerned about the community. And she was very adamant about that. And a 40-acre site in the middle of the city is not something that you find every day.
Right.
And as you know, we are a financial desert as well as a food desert. And with her commitment to now being ready to sell, I would like your assistance in trying to figure out how we can address some of the infrastructure needs that that site would require, as well as how to attract what the community needs. We don't want another wig store. We don't want just a liquor store or a convenience store. We want something that's going to uplift the community. She's adamant about that. And she's sat on it for over 20 years. So she's ready to move and I'm ready to move. So I need some help with that. So I will be knocking on your door now that we are back open. But I also want to thank you for, willing to bring the mentoring activities down to our businesses out in that area in West Central. We do have small businesses dotted everywhere, and they do need the type of mentoring that the chamber can provide. I'm familiar with Midweek. My company was first runner-up many years ago. You were there. You may not remember us, but we were a part of Midweek, so I'm familiar with that. But sometimes that feels intimidating to a small business, because a lot of them don't feel, because at one point I felt that way when we started our company, that there was any benefit to us to belong to the chamber. That was an outlay that I felt that we could not justify. But if those services are brought down to a local area, say like a community center for a mentoring project, then I think that we can grow them up and educate them into how the networking process works for their business. So I appreciate you for stating that, and I did make a note that you are familiar with West Central and that you're willing to bring the mentoring, business mentoring project out there.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you for that. I always read what you send in the mail, because I want to make sure that I can respond to my constituents when they ask the question, what's going on in economic development? So thank you for always keeping us abreast of that. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Director Campuris.
Jay, thank you, as always. In your recruitment effort, one of the, well, maybe the biggest attribute we have here is water. And I read in the paper today that Idaho and Oregon are going to have the worst drought ever. do you ever couple your recruiting efforts for companies with Tad Bohannon and you going after organizations that need to leave or want to leave areas that are in the drought?
So, being sensitive to the troubles that other folks are having, just as they're sometimes sensitive to us when we have troubles, you know, droughts come and go. But the need for significant amounts of water to produce something happen each and every day. And so one of the things that we've done with Tad and his team is talk about those industries that are heavy water users. And as the Little Rock Water and Reclamation Director, Greg Ramon, will tell you, at the same time, we have to be cognizant of capacity in specific areas of our community in terms of their ability to deal with the waste flow that comes from something like that. And so, yes, we look for, as part of our marketing, companies that need those resources that we have, but at the same time, and I hope Greg doesn't shoot me from behind, we've got, for example, a treatment facility that's servicing the area of the community from the port and that entire area that is woefully short of capacity from the perspective of what we're trying to do in that part of town. Now, same thing could hold true for Director Wright's 40-acre piece of property. So when you're looking at economic development, you have to first look at the capacity of those facilities in that specific area to be able to handle that type of load. So the short answer to your question is yes. The long answer to that question is, while at the same time we have plentiful sources of water, we're going to have to look at how we can increase capacity of water reclamation in specific areas of the community. One of the other things that we've been working on, and unfortunately we've not been successful with it as of yet, when you look at the amount of processed water that's being treated and then returned to the river, in this case, there are companies that use that type of water in their process. And our thought is if we can bring in companies not only that use the fresh water that's available from Central Arkansas Water, but potentially use the processed water from Little Rock Water Reclamation, then we're hitting on both sides of that fence, so to speak. It's just finding the right company that can utilize that. So we look at those assets when and we talk to all these folks when we're in the process of determining who we're going to target. But you recently read, probably weren't paying attention at the time because it wasn't meaningful, but you recently read of Springdale recognizing that they don't have the treatment capacity to continue to grow the population because the treatment capacity hasn't kept up with their population growth. In ways, we're there as well, and it's things that from a city perspective, we need to begin to target and look at for ways to resolve going forward. Good question. We don't have a problem yet, but we're close to having one. And Greg didn't shoot me that I know of.
And after Director Miller, Director Peck, and then Director Adcock.
Jay, thanks for the presentation. I've known you for a long time and appreciate your work and all that you do, and I appreciate the updates on the reports. Having been on the Little Rock Airport Commission, tell me how the chamber works with the Airport Commission, and certainly, I mean, we know what our capacity is and our limitations. 12-gate airport, it closes at night, not open 24/7. We have a limited number of direct flights, but enough to certainly connect to other places that go anywhere in the world. And we're not an international airport. Tell me how you work with the airport. Is it something that is an asset because we are so close to downtown? Do you get some questions about, do we need more capacity? Talk to us a little bit about how you work with that, and is how you recruit with that, or is it something that's challenging?
So first and foremost, we do have a working relationship with the Airport Commission and work very closely with the staff on a number of different projects. The most recent success story there is SCI Pharmaceuticals that we were able to locate in the old Southwest Airlines call center facility, if you'll recall. 100+ jobs, really good jobs in an industry. We talked about bio a few minutes ago, in an industry, obviously, that is one of our primary targets. But going to the air side, well, before I leave that, and we'll be at Farnborough in London in a few months, as we'll go to Paris. You know, they alternate each and every year, talking with aerospace companies about not only existing building space from the hangar capacity that's available out there, but also at some of the airside vacant space that's available for construction of new facilities. And, you know, you go back to one of the first projects I worked in 2005. When I came here, Director Miller, was an expansion of Dassault. Well, there's been 3 expansions of Dassault since then. And obviously it is now 1.2 million square feet, the largest facility that they have anywhere in the world. They realize it's a great place to do work. They recognize the skilled craftsmanship of the people that are here. We take that on the road and market it to other companies. Encore, Embraer, you know, all those types of companies that are doing business at the airport. We've played a role with the city airport staff, or excuse me, the municipal airport staff, in not only locating those things, but then helping them grow. On the air side, every time we're working a major project, one of the issues that's always one of the first things we try to address is air flight needs. And I can tell you in each and every case that if we needed to talk about a new flight to Boston, or if we needed to talk about new flights to LA, sitting down with Brian and the team out there, talking about those needs, having them go to the airlines and ask about availability of slots so that they can accommodate it, and then making sure, based upon existing traffic and where it's currently connecting to get to that location, they are very professional about putting together presentations and offering it to the airlines, and then telling the companies, we can or can't do that, but here's why. And if we can't, here's what it would take to make us to be able to do that. And so in some of those, we've been successful. And when we were working the HP project, they had to have, in Conway, they had to have another LA flight. The team was successful at putting that together. So we're constantly communicating. Shane Carter, if he were standing here with me, would tell you that we're on the phone with each other typically 3 or 4 times a week on something. So it's a very close relationship. We all want that direct flight. We all want that internet, and from a cargo standpoint, we are international, but from a commercial standpoint, we're not quite there yet. The hope is that we get there. The one thing people don't know this. One thing that amazes me about our airport is it's one of less than 10, I believe, in the country that is completely debt-free. Think about that. It is extremely well run. While we always are looking for something better, the team that is out there working, of course, with Bruce and the team here do a phenomenal job. We're trying to continue that growth. And when you look at when you look at a Dassault and you look at what they have done here over the course of the last 15 years, it's truly a testament to the professionalism out there and the ability to get to and from places quickly from Little Rock, Arkansas.
Thank you so much. Director Peck.
I'll be very brief. Jay, thank you. I always enjoy your presentations, and I always learn so much, and it's fascinating. I just wanted to say that I was particularly excited about hearing about the tech park and the success, and hopefully a phase 2, and that we're looking at using an existing building. I think there's just so much potential there. I hope we continue to invest in that. And Ken, I know, I'm just going to call you out, Director Richardson. I know we would rather people live in Little Rock, but I think as we continue to address challenges like public safety and education, infrastructure, that more people will want to work and live here. And I just want to thank you. I know the challenges for all of us were tremendous during COVID, and congrats. Y'all did an awesome job. Proud to know you.
It's truly a team effort because, as we've already mentioned, we can't do it alone, and we certainly couldn't do it without the yeoman effort of the city and its team in helping with that. So, thanks to all of us, because it's truly a team sport. And Tom doesn't want me to call anymore because I ask dumb legal questions.
Director Adcock.
Yes. Jay, thank you so much for all you do. I've always been impressed at how you can work with the people in the community as well as the big shots coming into Little Rock. I was thrilled when you give us bananas and apples for children coming to the consulate visits, but yet you've flying all over the United States, bringing us more jobs. But I would ask you, don't forget about 65th Street, the area out Mapleville West, east side of Little Rock. We have lots of places that used to have thriving manufacturing and other businesses, and today buildings sit vacant. I'd like to see some kind of program developed to rehab some of these community areas that need to have new businesses moving into them.
Can I, and actually, as Director Phillips knows, one of the things that we've talked about in the Southwest Little Rock area that I don't know, and Jamie may shoot me for saying this, I don't know if this is possible, but if we could do a mapping of available buildings that are vacant. I know that we can't do availability of partially vacant buildings, but if from a city perspective, through maybe a survey through city permitting or whatever it might be, if we could do a survey so that we can pinpoint where those specific places are, put them in our database so that we can make it part of what we can show folks who are interested, that would be really helpful for us, number one. But number two, would then provide the opportunity to match people who need space with available space, because a lot of these new businesses especially, they can't afford to build their own building, and they would love to go into a building and retrofit it for their needs and grow from there. So that would be very helpful to us. I don't know if it's possible, but if it is, it would be very helpful.
I'll be happy to talk to Jamie about that.
Thanks.
He's smiling back there now as you said that.
They're gonna jump me in the hall.
When Greg's going to shoot you from back there, Jamie's going to tell you thank you. Thank you.
Just want to make sure. Seeing no more questions, Jay, again, we just want to share our appreciation to you. We're grateful for the partnership. We've acknowledged all those that are part of the team, which starts with the members of the city board, our city departments, as well as our independent city agencies, being Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority, Little Rock Port Authority, Central Arkansas Water. We're so grateful, as well as with Mr. Bruce Moore as our city manager. We've been able to get a lot done in 3 years, and close to 8,000 in 3 years is something remarkable, unprecedented, and historic, and it doesn't happen without the team. We're grateful for your strategic partnership.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Madam Clerk, if you will, I'm sorry, we're in an agenda meeting. We'll now going through our agenda meeting. Are there any questions on the modifications that are added? Seeing no question, Director Phillips?
I'm looking at the agenda online. I don't know what modifications were added. I do have a question about number 4 and number 6, but I'm not sure what modifications you're referring to, Mayor.
Madam Clerk, if you refresh your browser, Director Phillips.
Oh, yep. They're there now. Okay. Well, I'll save my comments on 4 and 6. But I'll keep my hand up, but that's what it's about, man.
Sure. So we'll now transition. We know Director Phillips has questions on 4 and 6. Are there any questions from agenda items 1 through 7? We'll start with Director Phillips for 4 and 6, then we'll come to Director Adcock. Director Phillips.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. I'm gonna get my notes up. On number 4, the write-up says that this is the final 6-month contract extension. I didn't understand why it was the final 6-month contract extension. Could someone give me some context on why we're ending these contracts after this round?
Director Phillips, usually all of the PIT contracts are on an annual basis, but because of COVID, we decided late last year that let's do 6 months to see where we were, because at that point it was all remote and everything. So this just completes the annual, sort of the annual contract that they would normally have.
Okay, so it's not that they couldn't have more money in the future. This just is completing the annual contract.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I got confused by that. Thank you for that clarification. As it relates to number 6.
Yes, sir. You have already passed that when you all passed it the first time, or on February 15th. And that was one of them we had a lot of questions about, Fab 44 and the services they would provide. After continuing to look at the final rules from the federal funding, the staff decided that the program would be a better fit out of the PIT money instead of the federal dollars.
Okay, that was part of the question. The other part, that means that we now have more ARPA money, quote unquote, in reserve than we thought we did, correct?
I tell you what, you and Director Miller, y'all are on it, but that's correct. But we're going to put out, once the board votes on these next Tuesday, it's our intent to put another round of programs out with both funding sources.
Okay, and with that, can we get the updated amount? I guess that number's grown by a little bit, but I thought I remember us saying it was like 900,000. So I guess it's 900,000 plus whatever we're saving by using PIT money instead of ARPA money, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if you, okay, that's what I needed to know, and I look forward to further discussion about it. That's all I have on that part of the agenda, Mayor.
Director Adcock.
Yes. Mr. Moore, is item 3, is that new groups, or is it some of the same February groups?
Item 3 has been deferred. That's at the beginning of your agenda, I believe. It's somewhere. Oh, it's item 3. Or, excuse me, it's a third defer. If you see on your agenda, Angie, if you could go to that.
Okay, so 3 is the same groups that we've already looked at.
Some of them, but I deferred this because it became known to me today that CYF might not have fully vetted those. But they are some of the programs that we have funded in the past, and there are some new ones.
Okay, so how do we know which one or how much is new and how much are the deferred ones?
Okay. So item 3, I believe there were, you have it?
That says 9 groups.
Okay, 9 groups, correct. And so I'm not asking you all to act on that next Tuesday because they hadn't gone to the CYF yet.
Well, we set up here and pass all these programs, and yet out in the community, the residents are saying they do not know of these programs. So can we develop a better way of when we pass a program here that the residents will know that this program is in Wakefield or this program is in John Barrow? Because they hear us talking about all these programs we are doing for youth, but they're not seeing them in their neighborhoods.
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. Again, these are not for action today, but one was the Arkansas Symphony, one was a Bridge to Success, one was a contract for the Boys and Girls Club at Thrasher. So there were about 9, so some of the same organizations, but also some new ones. But I have a detailed PowerPoint that we'll send out to you all later this week.
Okay, and then item 6. Is this the same program that we looked at a few weeks ago and we passed and nothing else has been added to it?
Hold on just a second.
It's the
That's
FAD.
correct. As I was just mentioning to Director Phillips, it's just the funding source has changed. Nothing, the program, the parameters of the program haven't changed.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Mayor?
Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor.
Director Richardson, Director Miller, then Director Wright.
Bruce or Dana, to Joan's point about the knowledge of the community and those programs, in recruitment, part of the programming that without us trying to be the RFP committee up here, and that's part of their responsibility when you get funding to serve a community to go out and recruit and engage and involve the community in those programs.
That's correct. And I'll just, because it's right here in front of me, the Boys and Girls Club at Mitchell, they have, in their proposal, they proposed lives impacted of 15 youth. So it's their, once they sign this contract with the city, then it's their responsibility to fulfill the parameters of the contract, which would mean they have to go out and impact 15 lives for the balance of this year. So you're correct.
Thank you. And to my good friend Cappy's point, I think that one of the ways we recruit people to move here is improve the lives of the people who are already living here, which will help us deal with some of those social ills. So it was part of what we did with 12th Street. We had not just infrastructure revitalization, but we had a human capital revitalization. So we don't have $2 million sidewalks with $5 people walking up and down those sidewalks. I know that's a big exaggeration in terms of comparison, but I think you're absolutely right. Part of how we get people to want to come live here is we improve the people already living here, and that's why sometimes when we have these big announcements, Mayor, about these new job opportunities, it's kind of an oxymoron to me. It's a sad joy. I'm happy that we're getting these new jobs, but I'm sad because there's a gut feeling I have, and there's been some documented experiences that the majority of these jobs are going to be filled from people who come from those other 23 counties that Jay just talked about. So we're speaking the same language. We're singing from the same hymnal. I just think we need to do both of those, and sometimes I think we equate progress and improvement just strictly on infrastructure revitalization, which I'm totally supportive of, but I think we need to keep in mind that needs to be combined with human capital revitalization. We have the people here, some of them just don't have the skill sets and don't have the training and or treatment for whatever social ills that they're dealing with. So since you got my name, I get to call your name back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Director Miller.
Thanks, Mayor. This is just a comment to our city manager. You had put out a report December 3rd on an update on the American Rescue Plan money. Hopefully you'll do another update here pretty soon to show us, of course, it showed that 923,000 that hadn't been allocated yet. And then, of course, it's 200,000, up to 200,000 that's going to be funded from another source. So just to update a report, that's all, and when we could expect that.
I believe sometime this month. We're working on it, but I believe sometime this month, and then probably in April, coming back and have a discussion with the board about a second round that we'll receive in May.
And that certainly would include what's been, I guess,
Correct.
did we correct to say it's carryover? I guess not sort of carryover. It's just money from the first tranche.
That was not allocated.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Director Wright.
My question regarding number 6 is, we're denoting another funding source for this particular bid. Is that correct, Mr. Moore?
Correct.
Okay. I had a constituent who submitted a bid for these funds. Are we putting that back out?
We are.
Okay, so I shared with her that there would be workshops that would be held by staff to educate and explain the bid process. Will they be made aware that they can resubmit?
They will. To sort of keep down confusion, we typically wait until the board acts and then put the next round out. As Director Webb and I were talking yesterday about a totally different organization, we also attempt to have what we call a pre-bid conference. So anybody that's interested in applying, we typically, after the RFP gets out, we'll notify organizations that we're familiar with or that have inquired into their interest in bidding, and try to have it. And right now, where it used to be in person, it's on Zoom or WebEx, but that will be the case.
Okay, well, I'll be sure and share that information with this particular vendor so that they will be sure and see it. But I've also, a part of the complaint that was lodged to me was that implementing and uploading the actual application into the system is not the system's not user-friendly. And I want to know, I know we spent a lot of money on this stuff, upgrading these procurement standards and the software and such, but if people can't use it, and I've heard this from numerous people, not just from this particular lady. I've heard other people say that it's clunky, you think you've submitted something and you didn't, and you're looking at what something telling you on the screen that it went in, but then when the bid closes, you find out your bid's not in.
Right, and again, that's been raised a little while ago by Director Webb too, and others. And IT immediately began working with them, them being procurement, to try to develop a response to the applicant to let them know that their response has been submitted. So that's, if it's not completed yet, I know it's in the works. So it will be done by the next time we have a deadline for submitting a proposal.
I'd appreciate it, because it's hard enough putting the bid application together and then to go through all that work and then the darn thing doesn't get in. So it's very frustrating and disheartening, so I appreciate that effort. Thank you.
Director Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. I've now had the opportunity to go back and look at the additions to the modifications regarding the parking deck bonds. Is this in connection with our discussion later today with the 3 mills, or is this a separate, this would be a separate issuance?
That's correct. We have some outstanding parking deck bonds right now. That was to build the River Market deck. So this would be refunding of the River Market, or our existing parking deck bonds. I think it was in 2003. So it's different from the discussion a few minutes from now.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear to those watching. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Thank you, Mayor.
Director Wright, is your hand still up?
I'm sorry, no, I'm done for now. I would like to bring up something for us to look at, think about at the end of this agenda.
Sure. Director Wyrick?
I want to follow up on Director Wright's comments in regards to submitting bids and thinking that you submitted it correctly and it didn't work out. I got involved in one bid and the person had screenshots of where they submitted it and thought that they were done, and I asked for them to be forwarded to Mr. Carpenter, and I don't know if that happened, if we were able to, they didn't forward them.
Director Wyrick, I don't believe that I got them, but I'll check back and look.
Okay, because this individual felt like that they had submitted an application and they were not selected. So I hope that, and Bruce is aware of the situation as well, I hope that we have that reconciled. If not, then maybe this training thing that we were talking about would be helpful. But supposedly they had screenshots of where they submitted it and then it did not go through.
And I definitely heard about this after the fact.
It was after the fact.
But but I mean, it was before even you mentioned it, but it wasn't in December. But I know Dana and her staff worked with procurement, and we had 40 successful applications, but anybody who wants to try to make the city better through youth development, I want them to be able to apply and at least have a fair screening and assessment. So like I said, we're doing two things. Tom has got to assess when he looks at it, but then again, that training, I believe that would be very helpful. And our staff is there to really walk through the process with different organizations. So I've heard the concerns, and we are addressing them.
So if someone submits their bid, can they call and ask if it's been received? Is that a problem? Do we have a number to call just to make sure?
And this is what they have said to me, because I've asked and to say, hey, did someone submit a bid? And they can see how many organizations have submitted, but they can't see who has submitted until the deadline. And I don't know if that's a system issue and I'll give you an example. When the War Memorial RFP was out, I was trying to gauge how many individuals or organizations had bid on it, and all they could tell me was one, but they couldn't tell me who. And then once it closed, if you all remember, it was just somebody that submitted something that said, I'm not bidding on this one. But all we had was something, an email from an organization, and they couldn't go in and tell. And I'll have to ask Sarah and her staff if that can change, or if that's just part of our new system. But we'll follow up on that.
Seems like we spend a lot of money on IT stuff, so if we could get this bidding process fixed, that would be, I think, helpful, not only with these PIT, ARPA money, but other bids that are coming in as well. So I know we approved some money a couple of weeks ago for IT dollars that I think was for finance. So I think it's important that we have a mechanism to see who's bid, where we are, in order to understand and at the end game what we have. And I don't think it's appropriate to only know the last day or at the end of the bid. That's kind of crazy to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Director Adcock, then Director Peck.
This is on number 8.
All right. Well, let me ask Director Peck, do you have something on one?
It's the next section, sorry.
Director Adcock?
Yes, we received a pack of information from evidently the applicant on this afternoon at our desk. I'd like to leave this separate so that we can have an opportunity to look at it.
Well,
I'd just like to leave it separate.
yes, ma'am, it's
And can we have a presentation on this now?
yes. Director Collins?
Good evening, everyone, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. In 2006, a conditional use permit was approved at the Planning Commission for the wastewater treatment facility just north of Cantrell Road and on the Divide Parkway. That approval was appealed and it went to the board. When the board makes a decision on that appeal, it is done via resolution. So in 2006, a resolution was passed for that property, for that conditional use, and there were several conditions that was placed on that facility. So at that time, there was A through E conditions. One of the conditions in that resolution specifically, and it was in the write-up that was sent and also write-up that went to the Planning Commission, was item E. So the applicant, which is at that time and is today, just under a different name, Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority, requested that condition be removed from the resolution. And that condition just reads, and I'll read it specifically in there, sludge will be piped away from the facility instead of being removed by truck. And so Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority come to staff and requested the removal of that condition, and how is that process accomplished? So even though it was under a conditional use permit, since the board passed a resolution for this one, it had to go through the Planning Commission and to the Board of Directors. Staff was in support of that condition being removed. The Planning Commission voted and passed it on consent in February 10th, 2022. And the reason that we are supporting that is for us, now this, I can't speak for what was done in 2006 because I was not party to those. Typically zoning does look at the use of the property, but there are some aspects of use of some properties that I don't believe that we really need to be looking at. Like if you're looking at a treatment plant, yes, the lights of the plant, that's something that we need to look at for the adjacent properties. Also, the use as far as noise, that type of aspects. But there's other aspects of the operation of the plant that is solely the operation of a treatment plant. And I can't go into too much detail as far as the sludge operation or I think they have it a different term now. Is it not biohazards or bio-waste? Residual waste. So you'll see sludge in the but it's the residual waste. Typically, when you want to do a treatment plant, you don't want to whatever leaves your facility at that point, it's done. You don't send it to typically another facility to treat it, to get effluent out and everything. You want your whole operation at that location. This condition essentially takes what would be the very last product, the sludge product, and takes it to another facility to run through the system again. And the same ending happens. It has to be removed somewhere off-site. So staff supported that. We didn't believe that that operation needs to happen twice. So the treatment plant at this location should be able to treat it and remove it, based upon just hauling of the sludge off the facility. And I think this is kind of unique, even though the applicant is here and staff typically speaks and answers the questions. Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority is also an arm of the city. So they are also considered as far as a lot of things that we do, staff that we submit our comments to. And I'm sure that I'll have to default back to the mayor, the city manager, the city attorney on whether Mr. Ramon can speak specifically to the operation of why they need to do that. But my understanding is the pumping system that was installed is not really made for that type of operation to be done on a continual basis. It's been in operations. I don't know exactly the year that they got it installed, but it does not have a life expectancy of maybe 10 to 15 years, something like that, and they're going to have to replace it. And I've heard the nature of about a $20 million replacement for this system if they keep that up, and it will be continual. So you can, if that stays in operation, you can estimate about another 10, 15 years, you may need to do it again. And so that is staff's opinion, a burden on the taxpayer for an operation of a facility that we don't feel should be a condition for the CUP any further.
Director Peck?
Thank you. I'd like to ask that item 12 be held separate. Item 12 be held separate.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Director Adcock?
I'm finished with mine.
Director Wyrick?
Mayor, you already passed item 8, but Mr. Ramon's in the audience out there, and he's trying to solve a problem, and it might be good if we heard from him in order to let us know the problem he's trying to solve. Is that appropriate at this time?
I will extend the courtesy since he's here and make it appropriate.
What did he say? What did you say?
I'll extend the courtesy since he's here and make it appropriate.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor and city directors, and I'll be as brief as I can. I know it's been a long evening so far. Jamie, thank you very much. You did a really good job. As a matter of fact, I may be looking for you in the future for some work here. The Little Rock Water Reclamation Authority has the Little Maumelle Wastewater Treatment Facility, and that facility has been in operation since 2011. And in 2006, I believe, when they were working as to how this facility was going to be built, where it was going to be built at, and so forth, part of the resolution was that we had to put all of the residual or sludge, whichever way you want to call it, and really what I'm talking about there, it's almost like a wet dirt topsoil. That's really what we're talking about at the end. When the utility produces or cleans the water, there's two things left at the end, and one is clean water, And we're about 7 to 8 times cleaner than the Arkansas River, and I keep telling folks to fish thank us for that every day. The second thing that's produced is either a residual or it's referred to as a sludge, and that's really a terrible name for it. But under the condition that we're in now, we have to pipe that out. And the piping out, what that really means is we started off with wastewater, we separated into water and residual, and then we throw the residual back into the pipe and then have to retreat it again at the next treatment plant, which is Adams Field. And what that does is it takes up the capacity of Adams Field. We have to use an additional 40,000 gallons to move this stuff because it's so thick, and it's just a terrible process. It's an operational need, and at the end, I guess the easiest way to say it is there is a 5-mile-long, 24-inch diameter cast iron pipeline that's corroding as a result of the material. It's so abrasive, the pipeline is almost at its life expectancy. That pipe was never designed to move residuals or sludge. It was never designed for that. As a matter of fact, that pipeline was supposed to be abandoned when the new facility was put in, and the understanding is we were going to truck the sludge, and obviously that changed. So that's all I'm trying to do. What we're looking at is maybe 1 truck a day, maybe 1 truck every other day that would leave the facility, and that's really the impact.
All right.
Thank you.
See no more questions there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 17, 18. Questions regarding items 17 and 18? We'll now transition.
Mayor, I'm sorry. On item 16, this has got lots of neighborhood opposition to it. The Compassion Center is close to this. We have 3 drug and alcohol rehabs close to this. We have the jail right across the street from this. And in the neighborhood right behind this, in the last 2 weeks, we've had 2 homes set on fire and burned by homeless people. There's lots of homeless people in this area. And I would like to make sure we keep this separate because I believe the neighborhood people will be here to speak against this. Thank you.
Director Miller and Director Wright.
Yes, thank you. As it relates to item number 16, the one that's going to be pulled, be separate, which is fine. I've had a chance to visit with the applicant. I've also had a chance to visit with the leadership group of the Goodwill Neighborhood Association. They're going to meet with the developer. As a matter of fact, the president of that association has already met with the applicant here. They will be meeting with the leadership of the Goodwill Neighborhood Association. And so I don't know if it's totally correct to say that they are 100% against this license, but they have concerns about it. And I certainly have some concerns about it too. But having visited with the applicant and then having visited with the Goodwill Neighborhood Association, their president and their officers there, they want to hear from the applicant. And so the applicant is meeting with them. And so, I don't want to say that they are totally against this at this point. I don't want to speak for them at this point, but I think they can speak for themselves. And I'm certainly in support of Director Adcock wanting to have this pulled and having them come and talk as it relates to this item, because I'm certainly encouraging them to do so. I've also had some constituents, some residents who don't live in that neighborhood who are just concerned about another 5 a.m. license. But of course, as I've educated myself about this, the city has so many 5 a.m. licenses they can use. It's capped, And so this 5 a.m. license is not new. It will be something that's, I guess, going from one location to the other if that's the desire here. But I think there's some discussion that is yet to be heard about this. Again, it may be useful to have the questions that have been brought to me as it relates to this 5 a.m. license is, does a 5 a.m. license cause a whole lot of problems? I mean, I know as it relates to the Goodwill neighborhood, they have issues with traffic cutting through their neighborhood from Roosevelt to go to Asher. And that may have nothing to do with the people who go to this particular establishment. There's some questions that have to be asked about that. And so there's some concerns about some people that I've heard from in Ward 1 that, is this going to cause some more problems? What is this? Do we need another one in that area? I want to be certainly sensitive to what the neighborhood is saying, but I certainly want to be sensitive to the applicant and the fact that this is not a new license. It's just being relocated from one area to another. But what comes with that? When we have this discussion, maybe there could be someone from the LRPD that could talk about what happens with a 5 a.m. license. Is it more activity? What's going on there? This applicant certainly has, in my discussions with him and talking with him, is trying to be a good neighbor. The Goodwill neighborhood residents are certainly concerned about it. They want to hear from him. And so I think it's great that the applicant is going to meet with the Goodwill neighborhood and talk to them. So until that meeting takes place, and it hadn't with the whole leadership, but it did with the president of the Goodwill neighborhood, that person is open and want the applicant to talk to the rest of the, to the rest of the residents there. So I think this thing is yet to be determined as far as their total opposition to this. But certainly I think that they need to be heard. I think it's important, and I appreciate Director Adcock bringing that up because they do need to be heard. I think the applicant's talking with them. They're talking to the applicant because what we're talking about here are the patrons of this particular establishment causing the issues in that neighborhood? And I think that is what has to be discussed. Is it the patrons here? That neighborhood certainly has issues that have nothing to do with a 5 a.m. license. It has a lot to do with people taking shortcuts and cutting through from one major thoroughfare to another and causing a whole lot of traffic to go through their neighborhoods and certainly causing a lot of noise and maybe nuisance from some of the people that I've heard. And maybe that's something that we can take a look at doing as it relates to traffic flow. But certainly when we're looking at this particular ordinance, I think the bottom line question is, are the people who patronize this establishment, and if they do, because right now they have a 2 a.m. license, and if that establishment obtains a 5 a.m. license, is it the patrons that are causing the problems in that neighborhood? And I think that is a question that needs to be answered. I think the applicant will certainly address that with the neighborhood. And I told the neighbors that the neighborhood that I'm going to be supportive of, them talking with the applicant and at least listening to the applicant. And so again, I think that is yet to be determined if they're 100% opposed to this. So I certainly appreciate that, and I think it's important that this thing be discussed separately and give everybody a chance to talk through it. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Wright?
Mayor, mine is not on the agenda, but I do think it's something that we need to start thinking about. Transportation costs are rising. Gas is slated to be upwards of $5 a gallon by this summer. And I think this is a marvelous opportunity for us to look at our public transportation and promote that and try to make sure that our citizens know that we do have public transportation. When I spent $42 filling up my Volkswagen, I was kind of like, woo, we're not doing too much driving. But this is going to be painful, and food prices are continuing to rise. And I will tell you, I surely do miss Charles Frazier, because I know that he would be having thoughts and how can he get more people riding public transportation and how to promote it and that kind of thing. He's very proactive in that regard, and I certainly do miss him. But I do think that this is an opportunity for us to do more with our public transportation, because people are going to need some help here. So I want put those thoughts out there, and hopefully whoever has taken Mr. Frazier's place, I don't know if they found someone or is there interim, but Mr. Moore, do you know, since you all and Sarah are on that board?
Yes, ma'am. We do have an interim who actually served as the CFO at Rock Region, so he's very familiar. Charles hired him, very familiar with him. And we're going through, we're using a search firm to recruit the next candidates. And hopefully within the next 30, 60 days, we'll have somebody on board. But I meet regularly with Justin, and I'll make sure that that's on their radar screen. It was the last time that gas went up significantly. Our region did a great job and the numbers were very impressive as far as new riders. So I'm sure that's on their agenda, and we'll follow up with him.
Well, I don't ever remember it going up this high.
No, not this high, but it has spiked before.
Yeah, and Mr. Frazier was so dynamic and proactive, and the Metro Connect route in my transportation zone is increasing in the ridership, and he had told me before he left that it was so successful because people felt comfortable. They didn't have to ride with anybody. They didn't have to wait on the bus, and it came straight to your house and picked you up. But that is that Uber-style app that they have, and it is very, very successful. And if there's any way we could lure him back, I certainly would appreciate it.
Mr. Moore, since you're the only one left in here,
Let me say the mayor came and tapped me on the shoulder and said that he wanted to recognize Director Richardson, and then I don't know whose hands are up next, but I know Director Richardson, he wanted me to recognize you to have the floor, and I guess Director Adcock, you'd be next.
thank you.
I don't know how to do this mayor stuff, but I did a good job. All right, thank you.
I thought so. Thank you, Director Miller, and the issue about the 5 a.m. club permits where we dealt with this issue in a similar fashion about 8 years ago, and we even had a nightclub task force that consisted of Director Brad Kazorda and Director Gene Fortson, who went around to different clubs, and we could talk about this, but you didn't see a significant increase in criminal activity between those that closed at 2 a.m. and those that closed at 5 a.m., and the police verified that, and they came down and told us this. I'm supportive of what your whole points are. It was well stated. But I have one other question, Mayor, and it may be, Bruce, related to the one item that we just talked about with respect to PIT, and it was somewhat related to an issue that Director Phillips raised last week regarding the city manager's funding or spending authority before he brings or has to bring things before the board. Now, before, it was 49,999. Is that correct, Bruce?
I think the statute, when all this came up, it just says under 50, so yeah.
So prior to then, are we still functioning under that same system where you have
We
the
are.
same management, same authority that we've had in the past?
Correct.
So typically, the ones that we just voted on just now, typically we wouldn't see these. In most cases, those two that we just talked about funded, we wouldn't see those because those would be decisions that you would be able to make unilaterally.
Correct, but Tom, and we had extensive conversations about this, and Tom looks at, like, for instance, number 4, where we put out one bid, but it's for a total of, it's 4 organizations, but it's a total of $370,000. So he has opined that you got to look at it from a cumulative perspective because it was one bid that went out.
So I've always understood that, but to the point that it was brought to our attention, I guess, during the Black Child settlement, that there was questions about your spending authority, and I think Director Phillips raised this question in the meeting last week on an item we talked about tonight, and I think your answer kind of confused me even more because you said that was because it was a sole source funding mechanism that we were utilizing. So there's not been any changes to the city manager's office spending authority with respect to board approval or board.
Correct.
So we're still, okay, I wanted to make sure I was clear on that. And Director Miller, I think you hit the nail on the head with respect to the 5 a.m. permits. I think that a lot of times establishments get blamed for the actions of people who have no connection with them in various neighborhoods, and I'm supportive of everything you just said, and I think you hit the nail on the head with respect to that. We did this, I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, when we extended the club permits for, I think, 3 additional clubs in the city of Little Rock, because at that time, it was presented to us that there was no significant increase in crime between those that closed at 5 and those that closed at 2 a.m. So that's it, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure we're clear that the city manager hadn't changed his, I'm not going to call it discretionary, Bruce. I know you don't like that, but his spending authority within the city manager's office without board approval.
Director Adcock, is your hand still up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Over a year and a half ago, this board asked for a study of the Little Rock Police Department, and this week we received a copy of it. And when will we be discussing it, please?
Yes, this board, the discussion started in 2020. This board approved the allocation for the funding of the staffing study in 2021. Recently, it's been going through the iteration phase between the center, I can't escape the names right now, but Center for Public Engagement, Public Safety Engagement, Public Safety. They recently sent a draft report for members of the Little Rock Police Department to review, to decide if there's anything that, 1, is it feasible to do certain things? 2, if there's any clarity that needs to be brought from the internal workforce to provide back for feedback, and then going a back and forth. So it is in a rough draft phase, and that report that you received is like I said, a rough draft phase. And once they being the men and women of Little Rock Police Department go through their process of reviewing, I believe it's a 200-page document, and once they go through their process to see what's feasible, number 1, what works within the Little Rock Police Department, where they're able to provide feedback to the Center of Public Safety Engagement. The Center of Public Safety Engagement will then take that feedback, and they will decide if they need to make any they will approve it, any amendments or changes based on the feedback that they've received from LRPD leadership as well as LRPD rank and file. So I would expect within the next 30 days to 60 days that you'll have a final report from that center.
I would like to request that we do it at our next policy meeting in 2 weeks if possible.
That won't be possible.
Okay?
As I just shared, it's going to probably take another 30 to 60 days for LRPD to review, make their comments, that then will go to the consultant Center for Public Safety. Then they will then come back and say, okay, this is the final report. So once that's done, you'll have a final report. We will bring it before, there'll be a presentation.
Well, since we've all got a copy of it and we're all reading it now, wouldn't the police department like to have our input into it too?
Actually, no, ma'am. That we need the police department's input because it's a law enforcement standpoint. Clearly, we'll have the input. We asked a consultant to review our staffing and provide recommendations to us. We need that to happen first. Once we have those recommendations, that will be presented. Then we'll decide what we can implement.
Okay, in reading that report, there was some things in there that I thought might need to be taken care of before 60 days. And if you're telling us the report will not be back for us to discuss it within 60 days, that kind of concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that concern. That's just the process of when you engage a consultant. Director Wyrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I just briefly scanned through the report. It's like 212 pages of information, and I saw details in there as far as dispatches from 911 by the police department and crime situations that look like they were 2019 to 2020. And I'm wondering why that time frame and why we don't have a more recent time frame. I don't know if you know the answer to that, but if that could be updated, I think that'd be beneficial. The other part of it is when they were looking at the staffing levels and, you know, all the situations with the police department, were they looking only at data from 2019 or were they looking at it from 2020, 2021? What was their marching orders?
Very similar, if you remember the independent review audit. One, again, we have to remember that they received their contract sometime in 2021. We're in the first quarter of 2022. So they cannot do anything while they're working 21 forward. So they went back and looked at a full year of 2020, 2019. I may believe, again, I haven't read the 200, I choose not to read rough draft reports, particularly when they're 212 pages. I'd rather wait to the final. And so that's because we'll know what's exactly there, but they chose those, the consultant chose those particular years to go back and see what was going on.
But the recommendations that are in there, and I'm not a scholar on it, I promise you.
Neither am I.
I just briefly zipped through and looked at some recommendations. Are those recommendations based on 2021 activities that are happening in the police department, or were they recommendations from 2020 and 2019?
I'm pretty sure because they're in real time 2021. I'm sure they took some of the 2021 into account, but when you're utilizing statistical data, they generally want to stick with the years that have already been completed. Now, clearly, since they're in the midst of the process, they know what's going on in 2021 as well as right now. But when you have to look at stats and keep things from on a factual basis, they have to wait for those years that have already been completed. But they are looking at things real time.
So for me, if they could update that portion of it, I think that would be helpful, where they have the data for the police officers being dispatched, the crime statistics, those kinds of things. To me, it'd be fairly easy to look at our data and plug that information in to make it, as you said, more real-time than to look at 2019 data. That's just me talking.
Sure. We'll see if they can include that. Again, with every new additional request, that does add on more time. Just want to be clear there.
But we're looking at it now, 2022, and it seems strange to be going back and looking at data from 2019 to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Phillips, Director Miller, is your hand still up?
Yes.
Director Phillips, we'll come to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to be clear about that report. We will address it once we get the final report. Right now, it's a draft report, so we're not going to discuss it until we get the final report. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that's clear for people watching. Thank you, Mayor.
Director Miller?
Yes, Mayor, I've always heard the saying that no question is a dumb question, so I'm going to ask this question. What's the difference in this report than the one that I saw when I got on the board? There are two reports that I think we're making reference to. This one that I wasn't aware of, that's in the draft form and it's not completed, and then one that has been done and has been completed and is waiting to be taken to the next step. So what did this one look at? What did that one look at? And am I totally off base and thinking?
I'll never say, Director Miller, that you're off base.
Is it an overlap or is it two
No,
different
sir.
things?
So the rough draft report that the members of the board have, that is a sole report related to staffing.
Now, I did have some issues in it about areas of concern that have nothing to do with staffing.
Well, it's all related to staffing and operations.
Okay, so that one just dealt with staffing, and this, the one that we looked at most recently,
deals with the patterns and practices of the Little Rock Police Department as it relates to discipline, as it relates to policies that involve personnel, our general orders, whether it's different policies, whether it's adding a policy to duty to intervene, banning chokeholds. There's a number of different things, and training, as we all went through that presentation earlier, late this past fall, I believe.
and so that one is still at.
There's a task force that's being led by then Major Heath Hilton, now Assistant Chief Hilton. That task force has been formed. I believe they've had a few meetings. And that task force, very similar with the rough draft, is determining what's feasible to implement based on those recommendations.
Is there any timetable on when they're going to present their report to, I guess, this body?
They've been meeting at least 2 or 3 times. I'll get an update.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Director Wright?
Yeah, I kind of think I understand, but there's something that's just not connecting in my brain. But if this consultant wrote up a report and they're going to submit it for revisions and changes by the entity that they're writing the report about, then the report goes back to them and then comes to us. Isn't that similar to you writing your own report? That's the part, I'm not connecting. There's something I'm missing.
No, there won't be any writing of their own report. In drafting many reports from a consultant standpoint, not all, but many, they're providing a rough draft to clarify anything that they may not be aware of, to get some clarity, and then they'll determine, at the end of the day, the consultant's going to determine what is final. But they are giving this information to the department to review, to make comment, to analyze, because there may be something that's unique to Little Rock that the consultant is not aware, and that consultant will then say, oh, I may make an amendment or I may not, because this is still how it needs to be. Yeah, so that,
Okay. Now it's making a little bit more sense. Okay, I got you.
Yes, ma'am.
I went through a similar, kind of a situation by hiring a consultant or writing just a policy manual. And the entities that were going to have to utilize the policy manual felt that they should be the one to write the policy manual. And I'm like, okay, so you're going to write all the policies in favor of yourself?
No, the department didn't have any hand in writing this
Okay, I'm
at
good.
all.
I'm good. It's just like a red
Yes, ma'am.
flag was going off. Thank you.
Director Adcock, is your hand still up?
Yes, I've got something else.
Yes, ma'am.
I met a young man this week, and he's a new Little Rock safety officer. He told me that there's 5 new safety officers and that there's going to be 12 safety officers. They've ordered them new automobiles and uniforms, and they will be answering accidents, and they will be doing some other things. I would like to have the chief or someone come and talk to us about who these officers are, who these individuals are, and what their duties are going to be.
Yes, ma'am. We'll try to figure that out.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and also where their pay is coming from, because they're on payroll now, and so is it coming out of the police department payroll or?
It's coming out of police department payroll. This all was included in the budget.
Okay, so is that the money that we have because we are not hiring more police officers?
No, ma'am, it's an existing budget. We're at a staffing level of about 92%.
Okay, well then, I would like to know what funding we're using to pay them out of the police department.
The Little Rock Police Department budget.
With the budget was balanced, Mayor, at the beginning of 2022, and we're hiring 15 new police officers, where is the money coming from out of that budget that we're not using for something else that we're paying these 15 safety officers?
Director Adcock, it's included in the budget that was passed in 2021 for 2022.
Okay. And what did we take out of that budget to be able to pay them?
Director Linehan, will you?
Director Adcock and members of the board, traffic safety officers were implemented quite some time ago, and there were traffic safety officer positions included in the budget. They were not new positions. There may have been a couple of them, like maybe 3 more added. I don't remember off the top of my head, but in total, we've already had traffic safety officer positions. They're used almost like a cadet program too. Many of them become officers. They're civilian positions. And so there were vacant positions that are being filled. I don't know about others being added, but they were part of the personnel budget. And it's not in lieu of uniform officers.
Okay, how about the automobiles for 15 additional people?
And I don't know about the automobiles.
Because they have told me that they're having automobiles as well as uniforms and everything. And I would like to know what.
Director Adcock, the same budget that we passed for traffic, there's nothing new being added. The same traffic officers that we have always had, same vehicles that they have, you all passed in the budget. There's nothing new added to it.
I mean, we have an allocation for fleet, in the budget for vehicles, and they coordinate with the fleet department on which vehicles are going to be replaced and which aren't. So I don't know if that's part of that rotation or if this is something new, but we can follow up on that part.
The young man that I talked to that was hired said it is a new program and that this is the first safety officer that we've had. So I would like to know what their duties are, and they are going to be answering accidents. And so what qualifications do they have for answering accidents?
Yes, ma'am, it's not a new
you.
program. Same traffic safety officers we've always had. Next question. Any more questions? Director Wright?
Yeah, regarding the traffic safety officers, I'm kind of confused as well. You say these are the same traffic safety officers we've always had. I recall us several years ago, putting that in as a part of the budget to help relieve uniformed officers from being tied up at traffic accidents. These are those people.
Yes.
Okay,
They
gotcha.
also utilize part of the cadet process.
Well, I don't know anything about that. I don't remember us discussing that, but I do remember we felt that that would
Yeah,
help.
you all approved it, and yeah.
Well, I don't remember the cadet part. And I'm not saying that that's not a
Yeah.
good evolution. I just wanted to make sure that I was hearing you saying traffic safety and you saying cadet, but it is what we approved to alleviate tying up a uniformed officer at a crime, at a car wreck, just like a fender bender or something.
Yes, ma'am.
And, yeah, I do recall us doing that.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
Any more questions? Seeing none, our agenda meeting is complete. We'll now go into our policy discussion. Mr. Moore?
We pull up the presentation, and then Ashley, if you would pass it around, and we probably need to send Director Phillips one electronically, and the Vice Mayor. After our last discussion with the board regarding options, if we're going to target the August 8th timeframe, there are some things that we really need to start moving forward from a consensus standpoint. So, based on what I heard and just some of the other needs, I did mention that we'd also be looking at the departmental internal needs, so let's just go right into it. One of the things that I believe the Vice Mayor said is keep it simple. So we took that to heart, but also looking at what the overall needs are. So if you go to the second page. No, second. Okay. So just as a reminder, all of these issues have to be voted on separately. And the item 1 is just street improvements or category 1. And that language really comes right from our last ballot initiative for street improvements and drainage improvements. If you remember, even at that point, bond counsel recommended that they had to be separate. We confirmed that with him today, yesterday and today, that they would have to be separate. What I did add, just to be clear, because I know it's very important to the board, is that last sentence that says to include arterial collector and neighborhood streets. So we would go through a process after this, if this were successful, as we did in the past, and go out to the community and talk about which streets they'd like to see, and which drainage improvements they would like to see. So 1 and 2 are pretty straightforward. We also heard and we know there's a significant need for the purchase of fire apparatus. This does not include police vehicles at this time, because that would have to be a separate vote. The bond counsel, I did have at one point conceptually together, but he informed us this morning that it would have to be a separate vote. And also, when you look at, and the main part of that piece is, if we are consistent with what we've done in the past, where it's a 15-year type of extension, which we usually pay off early, usually around 11th or 12th year. Right now, because we run our police cars 24 hours a day, their life expectancy is about 3 years. So, and what we did find out, though, they can be included because you get to look at the overall average length of the bond or projects of the bonds. But at this point, I believe it is a priority, and we're going to have to try to address it in some form. But this would be, item 3 would just be purchasing fire apparatus. Item 4 is an item that, as the board, except maybe Director Miller and Director Phillips would know, was included in the last 3/8 sales tax, but we weren't able to fund it. So this would anticipate, basically, we're going to tear down the old police headquarters. And this would anticipate tearing down the courts building where it is and building a new municipal courts facility, which would also have a new property room, LRPD property room in the facility. Heard a lot about quality of life items from the board members. So this would, item 5 would anticipate general park and zoo improvements to include upgrades to all community centers and the fitness facilities, River Market Hall, War Memorial Park, Hyman Park, and the continued implementation of the zoo master plan. It also would include the development of the 15-acre downtown park that, as the board knows, that will be donated by RDOT once I-30 is done, and which will stretch from the main library all the way to the Clinton Library. And then we heard from Jay a little while ago how important it is to continue to expand the port. And so the 6th item would recommend that we would put dollars, we would include dollars that to the Little Rock Port Industrial Park. It was mentioned earlier that the city committed $10 million to the port. We've done $5 million already last year, and we're appreciative of that. We will recommend that doing the additional $5 million, not with this money, but because we need to go ahead and pay the port for that $10 million. But this would anticipate, again, funding the port to continue expansion there and continue job growth. So before I talk about next steps, I'd like to just get some feedback on these items, and because we're on your next agenda, as you saw today, we'll be hiring a Friday Eldridge and Clark as bond counsel. We'll also be going out with RFQ to hire bond underwriters, because if we're going to have a special election in August, the board will need to vote on this about mid-May or early May.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Do appreciate you. Director Phillips, and then Director Wright, then Director Wyrick.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager. I got a number of questions, and that may be because I didn't get a chance to join my colleagues in the discussion 2 weeks ago. First, I want to be clear that as it stands, I have a lot of questions, and I'm not supportive of this as it currently stands. I do have some questions that I want to make sure I understand. What is the time frame for the bond? I heard you mention, Mr. Manager, 15 years. Am I understanding that correctly? And if so, why couldn't we extend it longer to get more money out of this village?
That decision is a board decision, obviously. And I just use 15 years because that's what I've typically done the last 2. And the other main point is priorities change. And what is a priority right now in the city in 20, 25 years might not be the priority. And even though we typically pay these off early, a lot of it depends on, the bond market, property tax increases, values. And so probably the main reason, Director Phillips, is just that priorities change.
I can understand that, and I'll let you know, my colleagues know that my priority, and I think why people selected me to be on the board would be more than us doing what we've always done. And obviously infrastructure things are important, but I want to make sure that there's adequate resources to things beyond just infrastructure. Until I can get that sense of security, I can't be supportive at this time. Another question I have is related to the individual projects. I know you said we'll vote on this in May, and then the voters will vote in August. When do we have to decide before May what those individual projects are? So do we just say infrastructure? Or do we say 9th Street, the corner of 9th and Broadway needs a curb and gutter?
Yeah, if you, Ally, if you go to the first page or second page, the second page, yeah. Director Phillips, the first two are directly from the last bond issue we had in 2012. So as you can see, we don't name streets, we don't name drainage projects. What the board would typically do if you all decide that this is the approach we're going to take, we typically would then, after a successful election, we go out. And the policy that the board really needs to make, and we can do this by resolution, is how much of obviously, what percentage of the bonds will be spent on street and drainage and these other items. But also how especially when you look at street and drainage projects, in 2012, we decided, again, because it was a 15-year bond issue, that we were going to do these in cycles of 3 years. And we also had the sales tax money, which was great. But again, priorities change. So what we did there is we took 10% off sort of off the top for citywide projects. And an example of that was Bankhead Drive was not in the Ward 1 allocation that first cycle. But if you would remember, there a big sinkhole developed at Bankhead Drive. Well, you got to take Bankhead Drive to the airport. So I looked at that as a citywide project, and so we typically had taken 10% off of the top for citywide projects. We've matched a lot of grant money with those dollars, and we also. And another example is that on Canis, as you all know, that's a big project. So Director Wright and Vice Mayor Hines put some of their allocation in, and then we did some citywide money too. So the board really will set those broad parameters in policy, and then we'll go out and talk about by ward which streets we're going to focus on.
Okay, that does answer my question. And if I understand it, I'm going to repeat it back to you that we will kind of cast a wide net and vote on that in May. And then sometime between May and August, we will determine what those actual projects are, or we don't do that until after it passes.
I mean, it's up to the board. We've done it both ways. We've passed the bonds, and then we go out to the various wards. There's let me put it like this, there's probably close to $1 billion worth of needs just from street and drainage in the city. And we've done $200 million in the last 10 years, so not even a dent. But again, on the ballot, even if the board decides to try to say which streets and drainage projects we're going to do before the election, those won't be on the ballot. It'll be just this broad language. And this is the person who wrote the statute is the one who actually wrote this language. So, and Tom sits right at the table, the city attorney sits right at the table with us as this is being drafted.
Okay, and I'm with that. I wasn't trying to cast doubt about the process. I just don't know it. And I didn't know if,
I understand.
if I need to have recommendations on what streets or if that comes later. That's what I was getting at. As it relates to the ward, the different wards, if I remember correctly, City Manager, when we did this a while ago, all of the wards received the same amount of money.
Correct. We took 10% off the top for citywide projects and then divided it up equally by 7.
Okay, and then out of respect to my ward colleagues, they will decide, have, input on what happens from a ward standpoint. But as it relates to the at-large directors, how do we play in that role? I mean, if I'm in ward, whatever, pick a number, I have X number of dollars and I can say, hey, these are the projects that are important to my constituents. Well, if you represent all 202,000 people, what role do I play in that? How do I fit into that puzzle?
Sure. I mean, the board will have to vote on which projects are included and get funded. And again, we might look at this the same way we did last time, where we do these in three-year cycles, because I saw it happen twice in the last 10-year period where a new ward member was elected, and they said, well, Bruce, that's not a priority for me. And so if you're going to do that project, you got to find some other funding. Here's my particular project. So the answer to your question is the 3 at-large directors collaborate with your colleagues, but ultimately you'll be part of this will come before you all to vote on as a whole.
But to be clear, though, I mean, if we do split it up by ward, the at-larges, we don't have that same type of dollars to suggest how they should be spent the way our ward directors do. Is that correct?
Again, the board's going to set the funding policy. This is what I've been used to. Instead of dividing by 7, you might say divide by 10. But we haven't done that in the past.
Okay. And that will be part of the discussion before we vote on this in May, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the last thing with the public safety, the purchase of the fire apparatus, I don't know, how much those cost or if there's something we can do now, but I thought during our ARPA discussion that we could use some of that money for that. So this outstanding $923,000 plus the money we're saving, is that something we could use for this fire apparatus? And then, or at least one, I mean, I know they need more than one, but is there one that we can, or 1 or 2 that we can handle now?
Yeah, I believe Chief Hubbard said it's about 15 different pieces of apparatus that are needed. And
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I'm not even sure we can use the federal dollars for that, but we definitely need more than the 900,000. I mean, that one piece of engine costs almost 1.2 million.
Okay. Well, I just don't want the money sitting in the bank. I want us to do something with it. So I'll follow up with you and try to see if there's other ways to use it. I just knew that the fire apparatus is expensive and maybe there's an opportunity to do so. And that's all I have on this section. I understand, City Manager, you have a second part to this presentation, correct?
Just to talk about next steps.
Okay. Well, that's all I have on this part. I may have some questions about the next. Thank you, Mayor.
Director Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Like my colleague, Director Phillips, I'm in this iteration, as I see it now, I'm not in support of this. We are putting park and zoo and things like that into this, and we just had a sales tax election where people said they did not want to pay for that. And what I'm saying is, hearing from my constituents, they want their streets done. They want these bridges done. They want the infrastructure. I got an emergency call from this lady on behalf of another lady in my ward. Mr. Moore, we did a site visit to her house where her house kept flooding out. And these are the people that I'm hearing from. The flooding has gotten worse. Her homeowner's insurance is canceled on her. She has flood insurance with no homeowner's insurance and cannot get any because of the flooding that's taking place over there. And I don't know if this will allow us to fix that, these street improvement bonds, but we're gonna have to find a way to address the situation there. And when you say general park and zoo improvements, I'm just not gonna support that. And I'm not gonna recommend to anybody that we support that because I see a lot of underutilization. And you say we need a municipal court facility. We've got a $14 million building on 12th Street that's underutilized, yet you want us to build another facility. When we told people in 2011 that we would build a substation out where we ultimately put the Pankey station. And that would become Northwest, and what is currently Northwest would become West Central. We have not done that. We don't have a dedicated senior center. The one that was dedicated to seniors was never implemented and used for seniors, and now I'm hearing complaints from seniors that we, as the capital city, owe them more than what we are giving them. Every city has a dedicated senior facility, yet we pile people into community centers where they don't want to be with all the kids. They want a dedicated facility. I don't mind the port expansion things. I can see, because we're getting jobs and things for that, but this general park and zoo improvements, I just can't support it in that iteration. And not a municipal court facility, because we can transfer court over to 12th Street, and perhaps then we'll get some of our $14 million out of it. Because right now it's underutilized. And this is what I'm hearing from my constituents. I want to hear from them as to whether or not they want this. The few that I have talked to that are paying attention to this, they're saying we did not support this park and the zoo when you came out to a sales tax. And I don't want this to fail when we need these street improvements so badly. I need them. I got a bridge, 36th Street, people can't get across there trying to get to the grocery store. It's almost at the end of its life. And so I need that bridge replaced. So I do not want this to fail. I want us to be as sensitive as we can to what people want. And not just lump everything in because a few people say, well, what about the zoo? Well, what about War Memorial? Well, we put that on the ballot and people said no. Resounding no, 65% to 30-something%. That's no. So why come back with the same thing when people are telling you they want their streets, they want drainage fixed? They're tired of these potholes. They're tired of ditches in front of their houses, subdivisions that are incomplete. And we continue to say, well, we got all these infrastructure needs, but you keep piling other stuff in here. So let's make a decision to focus on what people say they want.
And Director Wright, and I hope that this approach has been a good one so far. When I was intentional, we were intentional in trying to get everyone's thoughts on paper, and we did. And 7 of your colleagues mentioned parks. Now, again, that's what this exercise is for. We're gonna develop consensus, and if the consensus is we're just doing streets and drainage like we did in 2012 and port, that's what this process is for. But my only point is we need to really begin to get it focused so we can determine the scope of it through the underwriters and try to move it forward.
Well, I want us to be a unified front, because if we go out there divided, it's not gonna go. Because people are already distrustful. People are already scared. People are dealing with high fuel prices, food prices, uncertainty. And then you telling me I'm gonna get this, and then, but I can't trust you. We need to all be saying the same thing. This is what we need to do. This is what's gonna make a difference and improve your quality of life in your community, in your neighborhood, where you live. That's the message that I want to be able to tell my constituents. And I gotta be able to sell that. That's all I have, Mayor.
Director Compuris, then Director Adcock. I'm coming to Director Wyrick after Director Adcock. I was going to get to you.
It's after her.
No, ma'am. Director Compuris. I'm just looking at the screen, everyone.
I just follow instructions.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to be very brief, and I'm going to pass out something that may complicate our lives, but I think it helps the discussion of what we really need to do. And that is, and this is probably not the right thing and the right time to do it, but it does amplify what you're saying. What are really the needs of the community that we need to have? And I'm not going to fall on my sword on this, but I do think there are issues in here we need to discuss, and discuss honestly about what we do need to do and how we need to proceed. So I'll have it pass out. I've got to go take care of an emergency, but I'll leave it with Cappy and pass it out, and then we can talk about it later. But I thank you.
Where is it?
Director Adcock,
Yes.
then
Mr. Moore,
Director
did you,
Wyrick, then Director Peck.
Mr. Moore, did you think about giving us some little votes tonight and letting us vote 1, 2, 3 and seeing which ones of these come out on the top?
It's funny you asked that, because after the way the conversation has started today, that was going to be my next recommendation. Ma'am? No, and I don't know if it's a vote or anything, but we do have to prioritize it and begin to pare the list down.
Excuse me, Mr. Moore, but I do not know where this is coming from.
I haven't seen it. I don't know.
We're trying to do what you have presented to us, and right on top of that, we get a 3/8-inch sales tax. And I think that we need to discuss what you're discussing and not have something put in front of us that is a 3/8-inch cent sales tax.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either.
I am all for the streets and the drainage. I'm like Doris. That's what the people out here are saying, because that's the impact they're having on their property right now, with flooding, with all the problems with potholes and everything in this city. But I would like to see us take what you've got here before us tonight, for you to give us each 6 votes, and we can vote 6 votes any way we want to, and come out with what we feel like is the top and what we can support. Will this be 6 votes on the ballot?
If you all agree, then it would be 6 votes.
I think that when we did that last time, and I have spent lots of time in the last 2 weeks, and I gave Director Peck some information tonight of years ago and everything, but I've looked back at all of our sales taxes, all of our bond issues and everything that we've done. And we did one where they had 9 items, and people could vote on any of those 9 items. And I would like for us to do that on these 6, is put them out for the people to vote. But if we're not going to do that, I think that we should vote on these tonight, give us 6 votes, and let us see where we spend them. Thank you.
Director Wyrick?
Well, sounds like we got a choir going on. I believe in the street improvement bonds, the drainage improvement bonds, the public safety apparatus, purchase of fire apparatus. I believe in the police substation because I think that's going to give some relief to the other substations we have. I have a question about the police cars. Mr. Moore, you said that would require a separate vote. What is wrong with the separate vote? Because if you look in the draft report that we are not talking about tonight, it talks about police cars in there and the method of us replacing police cars. So what's wrong with the additional line item for police cars? Did I misunderstand?
No. So let's say this is a 15-year bond issue, and I'm not, I mean, it'll be up to you all to say how long it is, but, and I just learned late yesterday, that police vehicles could be included, but it wouldn't, and I had it with 3, but then Mr. Russell told us that it would have to be a separate vote. So that's one thing. Director Adcock's right. Probably the largest one we've ever done was 9 votes. That was in 2004. One of the things I heard, and I've sort of heard it tonight, is keep it simple. Streets and drainage, and these are some of the other needs that we all are aware of. But again, one of the main reasons is that the life of a police car right now, because we run these 24/7, is 3 years. So we'll be paying for these over probably a 12-year period when they'll be long gone or should be long gone. It can be included. I'm supportive of it. I just also believe that if it's a priority, which it is, that there are some other options out there for us to be able to really make significant progress with our police vehicles.
Well, we've not been presented those other options. I think a lot of police departments lease vehicles as opposed to buying them. But anyway.
Let me just mention that's totally against the law with this. You got to buy them. Right, we lease them right now, but we couldn't buy. We'd have to buy them if we use the bonds.
Okay.
So,
police station, police cars. I'm okay with the Little Rock Port expansion, particularly with the information that we were given tonight and what our needs and desires are there. So I'm all about that. We had an unsuccessful sales tax. It was voted down. I think people are in a mode of taking care of things that must impact them. I believe those are the things that must impact them. I have a question. Say, for instance, public safety doesn't pass. What happens to, we just increase the dollars in improvements for street and drainage and?
No, we would just pay them off quicker. So if anything passes on here, or whenever the battle is settled, then the 3 mills will stay on. And that's another point that I want us to keep in mind. This isn't increasing anybody's property tax. We're already paying it now annually. So that's an important part. But if anything passes, then the mills stay on, and you pay it off earlier than you would if they all passed.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Director Peck?
Okay, I'm going to be the odd girl out because I am well aware that Rebuild the Rock failed. I don't know that we are 100% sure that it failed because of parks and zoo improvements. There was a lot of confusion and misinformation about the $20 million giraffes. I would say that, of course, infrastructure and drainage are super important. I would say that parks and zoo are right behind it because of quality of life, but because of public safety, because of childhood obesity, because of health and fitness. And we have 63 incredible parks here that just have not been properly maintained because we don't have the budget. I know we all live and work and play in different areas. I hear some of the same things you all hear, and I hear some different things. I hear a lot about parks. I went downtown, I guess it was the first really beautiful day, a couple of weeks ago, and Riverfront Park was so packed. I mean, people were walking for blocks to get there. You can't even park at Two Rivers anymore. I mean, we live in the natural state. We're a city in a park. I would hate for us just to not have the vision to take care and improve what we have. I still get so many comments from, what's going to happen with the Moore Memorial? What's going to happen with Heinemann? I would agree with Director Wright about the Senior Center. That was a piece that, one of the many pieces in Rebuild the Rock that didn't pass that I was excited about. I do think it's a shame that as a capital city that we don't have a facility for the seniors. Don't really know how to weigh in much on the municipal court facility if we need that. I totally support the port expansion, and Dean left for emergency and told me to talk about this. I don't think we talk about this now. I think we talk about what's in front of us, and then Dean can bring this back later. I've seen many versions, and I actually like the 3/8, so go ahead and shoot me. But I just had to weigh in on parks. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Director Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd certainly like to express my initial reaction to what's been presented before us, because I think all of it's important. I think there has to be a balance with that. And I hate that Jay Cheshire has left, but I would imagine when he is selling the city of Little Rock, he is talking about all the amenities that we have, including the parks, including the zoo, including all these things, the trails. And so, I think there's a balance that has to be done with this, but I certainly wouldn't want to live in a city that didn't have, the recreational options that Little Rock has, and that we certainly, in my opinion, need to keep up and try to improve whenever possible. But again, we received the presentation from the chamber very well, and we gave Jay a thumbs up about what he's doing. But one of the things I think in listening to this discussion that we could have asked him is, when you are recruiting businesses, do you talk about parks? Do you talk about zoos? Do you talk about trails? And I would have to think that he does. And I think that is one of the selling points of recruiting here to Little Rock. So I'm not as opposed to, parks and zoo improvements. I think all of these things are important. I just think there's a balance. So I don't want anyone to think that, I'm opposed to parks and zoo improvements, because I'm not. If I didn't speak up, maybe I should speak up more, but I think it's a quality of life issue. And I think that it's something that we sell as a city. And so whatever the balance is on this, and I don't know what the right balance is, but I do think all these things are important. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Miller. Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think anybody here is opposed to these kinds of improvements in all of these things. I think it's kind of a false narrative to even imply that any of us who might not agree with these 6 items would be opposed to them. I'm not prepared to say at this moment what I would support or not support, but when I thought when we were talking about keeping it simple, simple meant streets, drainage, and maybe public safety apparatus. And I would like to know, and the question I've been getting is what sort of dollar amount, if you could answer this, Bruce, what sort of total dollar amount are we looking at? And I think that would have an impact on my thinking as well.
Yes, again, we've asked Mr. Moore to take the lead and present this to the board. And so, again, Mr. Moore has listened to the board and brought this down in these procedures. And so he's being reactionary to what you all have provided. I want to make, there's no rush. At the end of the day, there has to be a vote. We know what the timeline is for a vote if the board wants to renew the tax. This is part of a working session. Somewhere around, as far as the dollar amount, it's about 105, 110 million, which what it was in 2012. Give or take, if you just do some rough math, it could be around 120 million for 15 years. The question is, to Director Phillips' point, you can only do so much. And Mr. Moore, you may want to walk the board. They may not recall there was a lot more money in 2012. You may want to walk through that.
Well, I mean, the main difference was we had just passed the sales tax in 2011, and that dealt with a lot of the public safety issues, parks, zoo, the quality of life, things that Director Miller was referring to. So it really made the decision easier for the board in 2012 because of everything that had just happened in 2011, including fleet. We were able to set aside almost $1.6 million a year for fleet replacement and the sales tax, and so we didn't have to deal with that in the bond issue. So when a lot of it is timing, and again, I just want to reiterate that I was listening to the collective body. I mean, I knew the missile course building wasn't on anybody's list, but from a public safety standpoint, that is something we're going to have to address sooner rather than later. So I guess that's the major difference in the process. And there were a lot of other things that you all said and our departments have said that we need to do, but in trying to, as Director Webb said, keep it simple. And keep it simple might be streets and drainage in the port. But parks is something that everybody loves, and I think even now there's a better appreciation for them after what we've been through the last 2 years.
Director, make sure. Director Warwick, your hand's still up?
Yeah, it is. I just want to say that I love parks. I'm not against parks. I'm back to my nuts and bolts principle of, I think we ought to provide basic needs for our folks right now. The other thing I wanted to say was, if this passes, I think that's when we go to the public and we start talking about what we're going to do in the community, because there's nothing worse than for us to go out and say, well, we're thinking we'd like to do this street or that street or something else, and then it doesn't pass, and then you go to a meeting several months later and they'll say, well, you told me you were going to do this improvement or that improvement, and it hasn't been done. And then you got to go through explaining, well, it didn't pass, so that's why. So So I think it'd just be cleaner if this does pass, once we agree on the terms of it, if it does pass, that we wait until that point in time and then go to the community and see what we can fund, what the needs are. Thank you.
Director Wright?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to ask, and to reiterate what she just said, I get that question a lot. So we do want to avoid any confusion whatsoever. So we definitely don't want to go out there before we get this solidified here. Because I still get questions now about the pool for the kids at West Central and the police substation that they never got. And they did, we passed the thing, and they still didn't get it. So I've got to overcome that with this. Well, you said this before and it didn't happen. So I've got to fight through that. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm looking for some stuff to drop off. So it's not really a selling measure for me to say, well, it doesn't increase anything. You're already paying it. Well, I'm going to stop paying it. That's how I'm feeling right now when I look at my check and all this stuff that I'm having to pay over and over, and everything's going higher and higher. So we need to be very cognizant of that and not to get our wish list, that I got one too, up here and think that in these terrible times that we're in, that we need to be trying to push all of this off on people, because I'm just telling you the mood that I'm sensing. People are just upset, and we need to be very, very sensitive to this. But there's something that I did not hear that I was hoping to hear, was economic development infrastructure dollars for our TCDI, because we're trying to improve those areas. And we're going to need some infrastructure to lure businesses to come into those areas. So, Mr. Moore, is there anywhere that would fall?
Again, that would be it'd be adding to a different, it'd be adding to the ballot. And the mayor and myself.
Couldn't go under street improvements because that's what it is.
We could not, I don't think under street improvements, you can just say this is going to go to 4 wards. I don't think, because then your other colleagues, they get nothing. Or their wards get nothing. So, but I do believe that we have a plan regarding the targeted community development to put additional dollars in there, and that we'll be coming forward with that pretty soon.
Okay, well, that is something that I felt that we should be trying to address, because say if we can get a grocery store on some land, then we might need to put some kind of incentive package together, and this would help with that. Anyway, thank you. That was my last question.
Director Phillips?
All right, thank you, Mayor. I guess kind of a question, I think Director Webb mentioned this about the amount, and I know there was rough numbers about the 15 years and us as a board deciding how long this issuance is for. This is my first time doing this. When do we decide how those dollars are allocated? So say it's 15 years and that's 120 million. When do we decide that 20 million going here, 10 million going there, 30 million going wherever? When does that happen?
The basics for that are what the ballot title says. So if the ballot title says that you're going to have X million for streets, that's how much you can use from the proceeds from the bonds for streets. Now, there are sometimes extra monies that can be used as the bonds are paid off, but that's what that would be. If it said it's going to go for these 10 streets, it could only go for those 10 streets, which is why saying street improvements as opposed to Jefferson Creek, some of y'all may remember that, keeps you from getting into problems because you either don't or you can't do one of the ones that was specifically mentioned.
Yeah, I understand that, and that wasn't my question directly. I'm trying to understand when we make that decision as a board. When do we decide?
When you call the election, the categories have to be there because each one's a ballot title, for or against these. And that is going to be sometime in May in order to meet the 70-day requirement for an election in August.
So, Ally, or who has the February 8th presentation?
I think I do.
I was going to get her to pull it up. Go to page 3. Well, I'm just going to give you, oh, there it is. So if you see Director Phillips, when we actually developed the ballot, that's where the board will have decided how much goes in each category. But the first thing we got to decide is how many categories do we have? And then, if we're looking at 125 million, okay, which percentage goes to streets, what percentage goes to drainage issues, port, fire apparatus, and that's when we'll get into that. But that number will actually be on the ballot.
Yeah, I get that, and I'm sorry if both of y'all didn't understand what I was asking, then I mean I asked a bad question. I understand that. What I'm getting at, I understand there's a process here. We got to figure out how many categories for our citizens to vote on, and to be clear to those watching, they're going to vote on each one of these individually. So if you didn't like one, but you like all the other ones, you can say no to one and yes to the rest of them. I get that, and I get we have to determine the categories. My question is, as a board, timeline. What meeting or how soon do we decide on the length of the amount of the bonds and the actual allocation among those categories? I get we got to determine categories, then we got to determine how many years, then we got to determine how much money going to each one. I'm trying to say, when do we do those things before we need to vote on it in May? That's my question.
Sure, Ally, if you go to next steps on page 4 of the current presentation. I'm sorry, I should refer to you as Deputy City Clerk. So here's the thought. On next Tuesday, you all will approve the bond council. We have initiated the process to issue an RFQ for bond underwriters. Once they get on board, and they will help sort of look at the current market, look at the different years to help determine the scope. To answer your question, we're going to try to get as much as we can done in March. We're fortunate we have 5 Tuesdays this month, even though we like to typically take the 4th Tuesday off. Not off, but we just have our agenda meeting on the 5th. But we're going to have to, I don't know if it'll be next Tuesday, but my plan is to continue to have discussion just about every week so we can try to narrow this down and get consensus. And I guess Dr. Kapiris will want to have a discussion about his item next week, I assume.
Okay, my suggestion, and this may be just because of my professional life, when I get ready to have a lawsuit, the court gives me a scheduling order. And the scheduling order says discovery got to be done by this day, experts got to be done by this day, pre-trial hearing on this day, trial on this day. Can we do something like that here? Could you say we are trying to vote on May whatever? So that means April 15th, we're going to vote. We're going to decide the categories. We're going to decide the amount of money. We're going to decide the amount of money per categories. Can we have a timeline?
We can do that.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm sorry that took me a long way to get there, but I think that'll be helpful. So at least for me as a newest person, I can understand the process. Then I also say, for the sake of the public and my colleagues, earlier we heard Jay Chester mention people coming in from 23 counties, and I think one of my colleagues said, well, what can we do to get those people to live here? And in my conversation with folks over my lifetime, you want to have good streets, but no one's moving to Little Rock because no one's moving here because we got the best streets. That's not a motivating factor. And I respect Director Wyrick's and the nuts and bolts, and you have to have nuts and bolts, but no one goes to Home Depot to buy nuts and bolts just to have them. You have them to use them to build other things. So I hear some of my colleagues say that they're not on page with this because it's not focused enough on the nuts and bolts. Well, I'm not on page with this because it's not focused enough on the bigger picture. What are we doing with the nuts and bolts? What's the bigger thing that's transformational for our city? I want Little Rock to be different. I don't want to be part of us just doing what we've always done and Little Rock feeling like it's always felt. That's not my priority, not today or tomorrow or going forward. So until I feel like this is something that's more transformational for our city, where our city just doesn't look the way it did 10, 15 years ago, then I can't be supportive. That's all I have, Mayor.
I had one more thing.
Thank you, Director Phillips. Director Wright.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you so much. I agree with my colleague by we want to be different. I had that going at my community center, and different was not what the city of Little Rock wanted. They wanted conformity. So now we have basically a $6.8 million facility that's totally underutilized, and staff sit around that do nothing. So I have a hard time seeing the trails and the Riverfront Park and all of that stuff when I'm looking at parks in my community that are unprogrammed and with no plan to program them. So to keep putting money into a system that is obviously broken, I can't cognizant that. That makes no sense to me. So if you want transformative change, you want things to be different, then have a different mindset about the existing resources that you already have. If you have a budget in your home, you see the budget that you use for the last 3 years is not going to work in 2022. You're going to revise that. You're going to cut. You're going to move some things around to still have the same quality of life or better that you want, but you are not going to continue to do the same thing that you did 3 years ago because you can't afford it. So I want to see some innovative thinking and thought processes to utilize the funding that we have. So we don't end up with a $14 million building sitting over here that's totally unutilized, but you want to go and build a new building that you don't have the operational dollars to operate. So we're still going to have it understaffed. And just what you hear, well, we don't have enough staff. Well, if you don't have enough staff, then we need to close some of these buildings. So I'm just not supportive of this as I see it, because the main question I'm hearing, when you going to fix my street? How you going to stop my house from flooding? I don't know what we're going to tell this woman. I've been to her house. We tried to dig trenches to get the water to channel and go underneath there. That didn't work. So we come back to the same old thing. We want to do the same thing, the same way, and yet we say we want us to be transformational. No, you look at the money you got and tell me how you can be transformative with that. And in our Parks Department, I know what I see. I don't walk the trails, and I don't go to Riverfront Park, but I go to Kiwanis, I go to Union. I stopped going to Boyle because of the death of that child. But I go to community centers, and I see underutilization and staff sitting around not doing anything. I don't know if that's because there's no leadership. I don't know if that's because there's no master plan. I don't know what it is. But I know that the money is being paid out, but we're not getting services that are going to change our communities. We dole out all of these dollars to these groups out here, but we don't fund our community centers. I don't get that. So none of that makes any sense to me logically. And then when we have programs that are working, we do everything we can or allow that to be destroyed because it doesn't conform to the system that you've already operated under for 40 years. So make all of that make sense to me. And you can't, because I've had the conversation. None of it makes sense. Well, that's just not the way we do it. Oh, but you want my tax dollars and you want me to tell my constituents this is a good thing for you to do. No, you're gonna get the same thing that you've been getting. Thank you.
Director Peck, is your hand still up? No, I'm sorry. Director Wyrick, is your hand still up?
Thank you. Since I was called out with my nuts and bolts issue, Director Phillips, I needed some nuts and bolts Sunday, and I didn't have them. I'll just tell you. To me, this is the only opportunity that we have to improve our infrastructure in the city. And if you remember, Jay Cheshire talked about infrastructure as part of the deal that brings businesses in. In 1977 or 78, Southwest Little Rock was annexed into the city. And we were told, oh, we're going to get rid of all these open ditches. We're going to fix drainage problems. We're going to do all that. Fast forward to 2022. And Mayor, you were in a meeting the other night when people were talking about they didn't have sidewalks. In Southwest Little Rock, we have open ditches. We have no sidewalks. To me, this is the only opportunity that we have, short of going for some kind of sales tax, to fund infrastructure and drainage projects in our city. I want to make sure that if we put this out there, because people are doing like Director Wright said, I'm looking at what I can reduce my costs from, because I've got more gas, I have to pay more for gas, I have to pay more for food, so this would be a little item. Everybody hates personal property tax anyway. This would be a little item I'll just vote no for. But if you put out items that are important to people, I think maybe we have an opportunity to pass this. I don't know. We might be in a situation where it's going to be no, no, no. But if we put a lot of things in here, I think it'll be a negative for the people that'll be voting. So, Director Phillips, I'm going to call you next time I need nuts and bolts, okay? Thank you.
Director Phillips, see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. And I have a few nuts and bolts, Director Wyrick, and we can build something together. And that's what I want us to do in the city, is build something together where it's not just nuts and bolts. And I'm not, to be clear to my colleagues and those watching, I'm not against the infrastructure improvements. We need them. They are part of our job as our fiduciary duties to our residents. I'm just saying I want more than that. And I think this is the opportunity to be creative on the either extending how long we do the bonds, or discussing the allocation of the money from the bonds to go to certain things. Well, we can do more than just streets and drainage. We need to do that. I want to be clear. I agree. But until we do that, plus other things, I can't be supportive at this time. Thanks, Mayor.
Members of the board, just Director Phillips, I think that's something we do need to determine. Is it the pleasure of the board to, again, I think it was around $110 million in 2012 for the 10, 15 years. We think it'll probably be about 120, give or take what it is, could be a little bit more. Does the board want to move from 15 years to 20 years to get more money for more of the things that you guys desire? That's the question. I think that while we're here, we just need to get some of this stuff addressed when you got a tight timeline. The question is 15 years, 20, 25 years, what's the board's pleasure?
15.
All right. Director Peck?
I would say 15, just based on, a lot of what city manager was saying. Things change.
So, Director Wright?
He's proposing what now?
15.
Yeah, I can see that. Because like I said, right now, if we vote, and that's a question I have, will we get to vote on each individual thing?
The resident, yes, the voter.
Us, do I get to say, okay, I will support infrastructure, but I will not support parks and recreation?
As a voter?
Yeah, no,
yes.
I'm talking about here. When we put a package together, will I have to vote for the whole package, or will I be able to say, I will support this, this, and this, but I will not support that?
We'll confer with the city attorney on what that.
I need you to let me know that, because if that, a lot of this stuff is in
I
there,
don't think
I'm
it's
gonna
ever
have to
been
vote
done that
no.
way before, but we'll confer with the city attorney later. Director
Yeah.
Webb, and Director Phillips.
Well, I don't think I have enough information to answer that question, Mayor. You telling me 15 years gives me 120?
Yeah, you don't know what to
does
give
20 years give me? What does 20 years give me?
More.
So I can't, I'm not in a position to answer that question tonight without that information.
I don't think I answered it either.
All right. Just trying to keep things.
No, and I would tell you though, Mayor and colleagues, I'm inclined to extend it because I know 20 years is more money than 15 years. So if that's your question, Mayor, then I would say 20 years. But I would like to know what we project a 20-year bond issuance to look like.
Sure thing. Well, again, Mr. Moore developed this plan in response to what the board members shared last week. We'll continue to have these additional meetings and work together as we move forward. And again, there's, I believe, a goal, Mr. Moore said, of somewhere around May to ensure we can have an August vote from that standpoint to renew the existing 3 mil bonds. That is the goal at this point in time and the pleasure of the members of the city board. So just, Mr. Moore has also shared the next steps for the next meeting. We may, board members, be prepared. If we're keeping with the deadline, we may have to have a special meeting and not have a Tuesday off. So please just, let's go ahead and put that in our mindset because there's a lot of work to be done. If you're gonna have to get it to the Placer County Election Commission and things of that nature. We don't want to, they really like for it to be 90 days or a bit more, and they don't want it necessarily to be 70 days. We want to, be respectful to them
Quick question.
as well.
Are we tied to August?
You're tied
We
to
have an
certain
election
dates.
coming up in November.
I
Right.
don't think
You've
you'll
got
see many
certain-
board members want that, but
The statute sets when you can have special elections. And it changes whether or not there's a primary election or not, which we will have this year. August is one that was discussed, but y'all could have it at the regular election in November, if you wish.
And that way it wouldn't cost us anything.
It would still probably cost us something, but not as much. But I don't know.
But it wouldn't be a special election. It would just be on the November ballot.
It would just be on the November ballot for those that are voting in Little Rock.
Yeah. See, it's not, well, like I said, I'm struggling because I want infrastructure, and I'm beginning to hear what sounds like if I don't take all of it, I can't get infrastructure, and that's unacceptable to me. I want to be able to separate.
I'm not sure I understand. If you're talking about what goes on the ordinance that causes the election,
When we vote in here, what we gonna put on there?
I mean, the board's got to decide what that's going to be. If you don't have 6 votes to vote for
I want to be
something.
able to be registered to say that I'm against building another building that we can't staff and because we have no operational dollars. I need that, my constituents to know that I'm not supporting that.
And let me just say, we will develop a process before we get to a vote on the actual ordinance to just see where the board is. I mean, just listening, I know streets and drainage and port expansion and fire apparatus are probably at the top of the list. Then you probably look at parks. And if I had to rank them right now in my mind, those 6, that's how I think I would rank them from what I've heard today: streets, drainage, port expansion, fire apparatus, Parks would be 5th and Courts Building was 6th. So that's what I've heard today. But we also have, and Director Compuris, just glancing at his ordinance, it's heavy on parks. And so we're going to have to deal with that, I think, at some point. Because Tom, I guess you drafted this. Does this contemplate that it would be on the same day, the same?
He just wanted an ordinance that deals with reinstating a 3/8 cent tax for 10 years.
City Manager, could you have Ashley to send me a copy of that? I didn't get a copy of whatever Dr. Computers.
Yeah, we can get it sent to you and the Vice Mayor. Yes.
Thank you.
Just to reiterate, myself and Director Linehan and Mr. Moore will be coming forward with another, in addition to this conversation, a plan to continue to address targeted community development as we were able to address it at the end of 2021, as well as public safety vehicles, particularly for the Little Rock Police Department, and a few other things. So we'll, again, that'll be a proposal for the board to consider whether or not to adopt. But that's also in the works from the Office of Executive Administration. Mr. Moore, thank you for pulling this together. I know it was a lot of hard work in kind of really condensing the feedback from the members of the board to present. There's a lot of feedback shared, and movement keeps moving. As it relates to next Tuesday, there'll be more conversation, more discussion. I'm sure there'll be discussion between now and next Tuesday, but again, board members, be prepared that we'll, more than likely, we'll have to meet every Tuesday to keep up with a timeline. Meeting adjourned.